Chapter 602. Ah! The sword pierced into his heart, and Tubert let out a shrill scream. His body instantly exploded. Many of the blood-colored light was burned by the flames of the dragon's fighting energy and could not transform into bats. But there was still a large amount of blood-colored light that transformed into bats and flew in all directions. But the next moment, List had already taken out the blood net. Under the hood, almost all of the transformed bats were caught in one net. When the blood-red net touched the transformed bats, it made sizzling sounds of burning. The group of transformed bats squeaked from the heat. They tried to move left and right, but they couldn't escape. They could only stay where they were and get burned by the lingering flames. The duration of the dragon's fighting energy was getting longer and longer. Lord Viscount, there are still 3 transformed bats that escaped. Elizabeth sat on the ground, her fingers pointing in 3 directions and shouting. Without her reminder, List had already noticed. He stood where he was, and at some point the swift shadow bow was already in his hand. 3 arrows were quickly knocked and shot out. It flew around in a triangular formation, and in a flash, it struck a bat that had transformed into a human and exploded. The transformed bats were blown into smithereens and dissipated. He turned around and shot another 3 arrows at a bat, causing it to explode. The last transformed bat had already flown far away, but List took out 3 arrows and shot first, then quickly pulled out another 3 arrows and continued to shoot. The 3 arrows behind quickly caught up with the 3 arrows in front. Under the guidance of the fighting energy, they collided with each other and drew a strange trajectory, catching up with the transformed bats in the blink of an eye. Boom! They hit and exploded. A cloud of smoke and fire slowly floated down from the air. The ultimate skill of multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows, had never missed its target. It had been less than 5 seconds since Elizabeth's warning. Looking at the 3 bats that were trying to escape explode, the female vampire swallowed her saliva with difficulty. While shocked, she was extremely glad that she had made the right choice. The young Sky Knight in front of her was definitely not an ordinary Sky Knight. He was unbelievably powerful. With this kind of strength and age, if he were in the Eagle Kingdom, he would definitely be qualified to be selected as a Dragon Knight candidate by the royal family. In the end, he would become a serving Dragon Knight like His Highness Alonso Copernicus. The royal family did not always produce talented children. In order for the dragons raised by the kingdom to display their combat prowess, they naturally needed a Dragon Knight. Hence, the Dragon Knight candidates became the geniuses in the competition. The winner of the competition would become a true Dragon Knight and serve the kingdom. It would be easy for him to be conferred the title of nobility. In fact, as long as one succeeded in riding a dragon, they would be conferred the title of Earl. After accumulating enough military merits, they would quickly be promoted to Marquis. After accumulating enough military merits, it would be easy to become a duke. Although the dragon would be taken back by the kingdom when he retired, and the dukedom would also be taken back, his descendants would still have the status of a marquis, which would be hereditary. Duke was the title of a country's monarch. According to the rules of each country, dukes were not allowed to be conferred casually. Only a Dragon Knight who raised his own dragon could establish a Grand Duchy with the title of a Grand Duke. If the descendants declined for a long time, they would fall into a Grand Duchy, or even be removed from the country and reduced to an ordinary noble. The thought of the Dragon Knight echoed in Elizabeth's mind. She even suddenly felt a little pity for List. It was a pity that List did not live in the Eagle Kingdom or the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. This amazing talent was destined to have no fate with the Dragon Knight. Of course, List did not know that Elizabeth was feeling pity for him not being able to ride a dragon. After he shot the 3 escaping bats, he had already taken the time to crush the bats in the bloody net one by one. In the end, these bats returned to the blood-red blood magic and recondensed into an adult male vampire who was bleeding from all 7 orifices. It was the pure-blood vampire Tubert Black Knight. Ugh! 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 Tubert could not move at all. All the bones in his body seemed to have been crushed. Or perhaps it was the restraining effect of the dragon's fighting that caused problems in the recovery of his body. He was as limp as mud. There was a vague sound coming from his throat, but he could not say a complete sentence or a complete word. His eyes were also a little unfocused, unable to focus. What's wrong with him? List turned around and asked why Lisbeth, who was still in a daze. I just attacked. Why does he look like he's about to die? Ah! Why Lisbeth came back to her senses and stammered. Maybe you hit him too hard, Lord Viscount. From the looks of it, it's very likely that the blood magic, bat incarnation was forcefully broken, causing a magic backlash, and he can't maintain the normal functioning of his body. The body of a vampire could switch between bat and human at will, relying on the blood magic, bat incarnation. Once the magic was forcefully broken, it would easily backfire. But unless it was an attack that was powerful enough to kill in an instant, this blood magic would not be broken even if many bats were killed. As long as one bat incarnation escaped, Tubert would be able to return to his human body, and he would only lose a little blood magic. The crushed bats would turn back into blood magic and return to his body through an unknown method. List guessed that it was an application of the magic net. The transfer of magic regardless of distance. No matter what, Tubert had already collapsed, and it seemed that he was not going to be happy. While Lisbeth walked over excitedly, an indistinct handprint on her face. She stared at Tubert with uncontrollable desire in her eyes. My lord, dig out his heart before it stops beating. Blood magic can be condensed seamlessly. And his belongings. There's a blood box with my heart in it. But she was still rational and knew that she had to ask List for instructions first. Please let me take it out for my lord. List nodded and gestured for why Lisbeth to do it. Then, why Lisbeth squatted down and cast a spell with both hands. Balls of blood-red light appeared and enveloped Tubert, who was still alive. Where the blood magic touched, Tubert's blood actually flowed backward, and soon flowed back into his body, gradually gathering at the location of his heart. Ugh, ugh, ugh. Like a cassette, Tubert repeated every syllable that was released. While he was chanting, why Lisbeth suddenly cut open his chest, reached in, and plucked out a glowing red heart that had already stopped beating. The heart didn't seem to be made of flesh and blood, but was translucent like blood jade. The blood vessels were clearly visible, and they were slowly bleeding. When the blood jade heart was pulled out, Tubert's unfocused eyes suddenly flashed, and the muscles of his muddy body twitched. He slowly raised his arm, as if trying to stop why Lisbeth from plucking his heart. But that was just the final radiance of the setting sun. Halfway through, his muscles relaxed, and his arm instantly drooped, completely dead. Why Lisbeth didn't slow down at all after the heart was plucked out. While the body hadn't cooled down and the blood magic was still lingering in Tubert's body, she continued to cast blood magic. She magically took out several belongings from the inside pocket of Tubert's windbreaker. Finally, she slowly took out a long box. She couldn't wait to open the box. Immediately, a blood-red light flickered, and 5 blood jade-like hearts were arranged in the box. Just as she was about to use her hand to take out her heart, a voice suddenly rang out. A light cough came from behind her, while Lisbeth was stunned. She turned around with an embarrassed smile on her face. My lord, this is my heart. Chapter 603. A vampire's heart was similar to a lich's phylactery. However, a lich's phylactery was a coordinate that led to the real world, while a vampire's heart was the core of life. List put away the 5 hearts in the long box, including Tubert's heart. He did not trust vampires. However, he threw the ball of blood back to why Lisbeth. Tubert is already dead. I was going to ask him a few questions. Now that the pure blood is dead, how are we going to contact the other 4 mixed vampires? As long as you squeeze the heart, they will sense it and come to see you. With the heart, we are all your vampire's servants. Why Lisbeth quickly changed her attitude after List took control of her heart. She became gentle and obedient. She obviously understood that List had become her master. Take all of Tubert's belongings. Let's go back first. Otherwise, my father will probably go talk to the prince. List whistled and summoned the chocobo Loki. Why Lisbeth had already absorbed the ball of blood into her body. She smiled charmingly. My body is still weak. Sir, do you mind if I ride on your mount? I'll be straightforward. Why, Elizabeth, your tricks are useless against me. Do you understand? There are many noble ladies in the Grand Duchy who wish to share a night with me, but not many of them are worthy of my attention. So, being a vampire servant is the most reasonable choice. With that, List mounted the bird and galloped towards the port of Iron Shoe City. While Elizabeth stomped her feet. She was angry and frustrated, but there was nothing she could do. She could only transform into a bat and chase after the chocobo. After returning to the sunset, List first went to the Tulip to meet with the Count. Is it settled? It was easier than I thought. It was just a bat that couldn't see the light. Unfortunately, I was too heavy-handed and killed Tubert Black Knight. He also had 5 mixed blood subordinates. They're basically my vampire servants now. Maybe I can get some secrets out of them. List gave a simple account of what had happened. The arrival of the vampires was not an isolated incident. It had already affected the internal stability of the Grand Duchy. I didn't expect vampires to actually exist and hide among us. The Earl pondered for a moment and said, "Let's pretend that this never happened. You need to restrain the 5 vampires. Don't expose them at will. We don't need to worry about the Grand Duke." I understand. By the way, why didn't you bring Elizabeth here? Let me see what a vampire looks like. She can even turn into a bat. William was curious. I'll bring her to you after we set sail. A vampire turning into a bat is indeed quite magical. They didn't talk for long. After getting the Count's suggestion to downplay the matter, he returned to the sunset. Elizabeth Black Knight was in his room, playing with the belongings she had seized from Tubert. There were 5 items in total. A shiny silver dagger. Why, Elizabeth knew it very well. My lord, this dagger is called Silver Oath. It's one of the magic equipment passed down in the Black Knight family. It can increase the power of blood magic. For vampires, it's a top-notch equipment for night assassinations. A set of clothes, including a black cloak with a red background, and a tuxedo similar to Frack Abier. This set of clothes was similar to Elizabeth's tight leather jacket and trousers. It was just an ordinary magic equipment that could change with the wearer and could only provide a small amount of defensive attributes. An item that looked like a book. Why, Elizabeth also knew it. This book is called Reincarnation Ritual. It has only one function. Using blood magic, it can boil a person's blood and gradually transform them into the cold-blooded vampire. It's the same set of items as the blood-drawing needles you confiscated. I used this reincarnation ritual to transform from a mage to a vampire. She stroked the cover and fell into a brief moment of reminiscence. Then she came back to her senses and picked up the 4th item. I've never seen this mirror before, but I feel that it should be a protective item. It can probably resist sunlight and restrain light magic. Finally, she picked up the 5th item. This item was a red mask. I often use this mask. It's called Blood Mask. Every time I take back my heart for a short period of time and start training under Tubert's supervision, I will wear it. It can calm the hot and dry elements in a vampire's blood and keep the blood cool. The blood of vampires is cold. Sunlight or light magic would make it warm and boil, thereby consuming and interfering with blood magic and greatly reducing their strength. After knowing the function of each item, List took them away from Elizabeth one by one, ignoring her resentful gaze. I heard Tubert call you Mary. Is that your real name? When I became a vampire, Tubert gave me the name Elizabeth Black Knight. It's been 20 years. Mary Truth was my name when I was a mage. Later, it became my code name in the Black Knight family. Bloody Mary. List narrowed his eyes. The smoke mission happened to float in front of him. Mission complete. Reward, Bloody Mary Elizabeth Black Knight. Before List could sigh at the dominance of the nickname Bloody Mary, Elizabeth said quickly, "Vampires of mixed blood like us all have a code name. Purebloods don't like to call us by our names. Oh, I forgot to mention that the other 4 vampires that Tubert brought are called Scarlet Peggy, Bloody Hamel, Night Demon Wimbledon, and One-Eyed Wuxia. They were all very domineering. Among them, One-Eyed Wuxia made List raise his eyebrows. His coachman's name was One-Eyed Barton. Because of this interruption, the smoke had dissipated, and List hadn't had time to read the new mission yet. But he wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he asked, "Vampires live by sucking blood?" "My lord, vampires don't suck blood. Those purebloods like to call themselves vampires. The authors of night novels always describe us as blood-sucking monsters. In fact, we're just mages who study blood magic. It's just that our bodies have some unique changes." "So you also eat?" "Of course we eat, my lord. We eat what normal people eat." Tubert was already dead, and his heart was in List's hands. Why, Elizabeth answered all his questions without hiding anything, behaving like a loyal subordinate. List also gradually understood the vampires, a group of spellcasters that were neither human nor ghost. Other than the fact that their inheritance was relatively secretive, that they liked to appear at night, that they turned into bats to do bad things, and that they had a bad reputation, there wasn't much special about them. They were distributed in every corner of the continent, but there were very few of them. Firstly, the fertility rate was very low, and it was very difficult to give birth to purebloods. Secondly, transforming a mixed blood required a lot of resources, and it was impossible for a talented person to become a foreign mixed blood. A vampire family with 50 members was already a large family. As they chatted, they talked about the cause of this incident. Bloody Mary explained, "Originally, Tubert didn't intend to transform you, my lord. Even the Black Knight family couldn't bear to waste the resources of transforming a mixed blood. Later, when he heard that you were the youngest Sky Knight of Sapphire, Tubert had the idea to transform you." List didn't say anything about it, but he already knew that this had to be the backlash of the power of fate from the failure of the last mission, which attracted Tubert's malice toward him. Chapter 604. Sorcerers, Druids, Vampires, and Wizards. List had already seen 4 special spellcasters. In Curtis Truth's notes, there was an illustration of the Eye of Truth. The 3 corners of the triangle represented matter, magic, and spirit, and the corresponding spellcaster professions were recorded. For matter, there were alchemists, vampires, and necromancers. For magic, there were sorcerers and druids. In the spiritual category, there were wizards, enchanters, prophets, succubi, and shamans. Most of the ancient wizards had transformed themselves into liches, which meant that Curtis Truth and Marquis Bull Andy Sapphire belonged to the category of wizards. He didn't know if these spellcasters really existed, but he could at least infer that they more or less existed on this continent. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire was located in a remote area, and it had only been founded for 150 years, so it was relatively clean. Those special spellcasters, even if they existed, should be distributed in the various countries of the continent. Tubert's black cloak with a red background will be your reward for pledging allegiance to me. Take it and wear it. I'll ask Thomas to arrange a cabin for you on the ship. You can stay on the ship and focus on being my vampire servant. If you perform well, I'll consider whether or not to return your heart to you." After chatting for a while, List couldn't dig out more information from Y. Elizabeth. He began to arrange her new identity. "You're no longer a vampire of the Black Knight family. Don't use Y. Elizabeth Black Knight anymore. Revert to your original name. Mary? Bloody Mary. Sounds good." Bloody Mary was a little reluctant and said ingratiatingly, "Sir, why don't you let me absorb Tubert's heart? When I become a pure-blood vampire, I can serve you better. When you make enough contributions, everything is negotiable. Without contributions, don't say anything." List calmly stated a fact. "According to my previous standards, I wouldn't have let you live if you dared to plot against me. You should be grateful that I'm not killing you now." This was a bluff. Back then, Paris had also lurked in the castle with the intention of harming him, but he did not kill Paris. Or rather, his thoughts were deeply influenced by the smoke mission. The power of fate represented by the smoke and his own spiritual power might have long been fused. It was hard to tell them apart. Paris and Bloody Mary were both rewards of the smoke mission, so he was naturally reluctant to kill them. Paris had her sister's temperance, and now Bloody Mary also had her heart temperance. A temperance method naturally maximized benefits and reaped more benefits. When Paris came to the flower town, Liszt was still very weak and played the emotional card. Bloody Mary had already missed the best opportunity. Now that she had arrived, Liszt was already a half-dragon knight. There was no need for him to play the emotional card anymore. Holding the heart, no matter how Bloody Mary struggled, she couldn't escape from his hands. Putting the heart into the gem space, she couldn't steal it. I'm going to take a shower now. The 4 vampires might come later. You'll have to receive them and let them understand their current situation. Understood, my lord, Bloody Mary said seriously. She could finally tell that this young Sky Knight was not an immature youth who would be seduced by beauty. Besides, she was not very beautiful, not young, nearly 40. She had been turned into a vampire at the age of 17, and had spent 20 years since then. Because of the blood magic, he did not look old, and his body was still very tender. But in the end, he was no longer young. Moreover, she could clearly feel that Liszt's enthusiasm quickly decreased when he mentioned her age. "Hey men, dang dang dang." A knock on the door brought Bloody Mary back to reality. She replied in unskilled serpentines, "Please come in." The door was pushed open and a maid, who already knew about Bloody Mary's existence, came in with a glass of juice and placed it on the table. "Madam, please have some juice." "Thank you." Bloody Mary was very friendly towards Liszt's servant. She was a smart woman and knew that her beauty would not be of any use in the future. She had to rely on her own ability to win Liszt's appreciation and reward in order to get her heart back and regain her freedom. She might even get Tubert's heart and become a pureblood. Therefore, she could not offend Liszt's servant. A casual remark from the servant could ruin her image in Liszt's mind. The maid responded with a smile, but when she saw Bloody Mary's red eyes and pale face, she could not help but open her mouth in surprise. She immediately reacted. "Sorry, I didn't mean it. It's okay. I'm not a sapphire person. My eyes are a little different from yours." "Ah, yes, madam. But your eyes are very beautiful." "Thank you. If you have no other instructions, I'll leave first." "Go ahead." After the maid left the room, Bloody Mary suddenly shouted at the window, "Peggy, come in quickly." Flutter, flutter. A bat flapped its wings and flew in. The bat landed on the ground and quickly turned into a human. It was a tall, blonde woman with the same pale face and blood-red eyes. "Mary, Lord Tubert summoned me." "What's the matter? The atmosphere here is not friendly to us. There is no Lord Tubert anymore. Now, your master is the Viscount of Black Horse Island, Lord Liszt, Tulip." Scarlet Peggy looked ordinary, but her voice was even sharper. "Are you kidding me?" "I'm not kidding. Tubert was killed by Lord Liszt with a sword. Even the bats he transformed into were crushed one by one. Now, our hearts are in the hands of Lord Liszt. He summoned you here obviously to incorporate you." Scarlet Peggy still did not believe it. Bloody Mary directly picked up the cloak on the table. "See, Tubert's clothes have been rewarded to me by Lord Liszt. So, Scarlet Peggy, accept your new identity and be loyal to Lord Liszt. As long as you perform well, freedom is not an extravagant hope." Scarlet Peggy's eyes flashed. "Then what about Lord Liszt?" "Lord Liszt has something to do and will be back in a while. I'm waiting for you here, as well as Hamel, Wimbledon, and Uso, to let you understand the fact that Tubert's matter is not a joke." "Mary, tell me about Lord Liszt. I seem to have heard of this name. It seems to be the youngest Sky Knight of Sapphire?" "You're right, but I need to clarify one thing. Lord Liszt's strength is terrifying, so terrifying that he could kill Tubert in seconds. As for how terrifying he is, only when you see him kill Tubert in seconds can you truly understand that kind of insufferably arrogant violence." Chapter 605. Bloody Mary was bragging about the horror of Liszt to Scarlet Peggy, while Liszt was looking at the smoke mission in the bathroom. It only took him 5 minutes to take a shower, but he was thinking more. Thinking about the vampire incident, thinking about the Pioneering Order War. He was also thinking about the new mission. Not only bats but also a lot of rats are dispatched in the dark night. They are mixed in with the orders of chivalry. Perhaps the intention of the battle at the roaring estuary will be revealed by them. Please defeat the great sorcerer's harbor baptism. Reward: a hand-drawn map of the ruins. This was the content of the new mission. The reward of the hand-drawn map of the ruins did not need to be considered for the time being. He was thinking about the information revealed in the mission content. Rats? So, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's plan to attack the roaring estuary will be discovered? He could not help but frown. The plan was just confirmed in the daytime meeting. Even if the rats know the direction of the attack, it will be difficult to deliver it in time, unless they take a fast sailboat and can reach the roaring estuary one day earlier than the ordinary fleet. Every time the Grand Duchy of Sapphire fought a pioneering order war, they did not reveal the direction of the attack in advance. Instead, the Grand Duke personally gave the order on the eve of the attack. This could avoid the rats of the Eagle Kingdom and the possibility of obtaining the battle intention. After all, attacking at sea was different from attacking on land. No matter how fast the rats ran, they had to take a boat. If they took a boat, naturally the Grand Duke's palace fleet was the fastest, and they could attack before the rats revealed the secret. When the attack began, it would be meaningless for the rats to deliver the information. Therefore, it was basically useless to steal information. Even a rat with a flying mount could not fly continuously on the sea without stopping. Unless the rats take a boat first and then send a carrier pigeon on the boat. No, the carrier pigeon has a fixed flight route. How can the rats ensure that the carrier pigeon comes and goes is the direction of the fleet's attack? They set off from the port of Oxfoot City on Iron Hoof Island. It would take 6 to 7 days to reach the coastline of the Eagle Kingdom, more than 1,000 kilometers away. This distance determined that the suddenness of the fleet's attack could not be predicted. Unless the Dragon Knight rode a dragon and flew without rest, he might really be able to cross the sea without stopping. Other World of Warcraft couldn't fly for more than 1,000 kilometers without stopping. There's another possibility. We can take a boat and enter the range of World of Warcraft before sending the letter. This way, we might be able to send the information 1 or 2 days in advance. But come to think of it, even if we send the information 3 days in advance, what kind of defense can we put up? Every year, at a fixed time, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire would launch an attack. However, the Eagle Kingdom could not stop them. Without the coordination and command of the king, it was impossible for the lords of the various territories to unite and work together to organize a defense system. Together with all kinds of interests involved, the development order was like a feast for both the enemy and the ally in the hinterland along the coast. Most importantly, there are several coastal cities at the mouth of the roaring estuary. They are all places where we can launch an attack. The meeting in Cowhoof City only determined the general direction of attack, not the specific target. The detailed attack plan will be discussed again during the voyage. Therefore, the chances of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire being ambushed were slim. If my guess is correct, this mission is more likely to be an accident caused by the misfortune brought about by the failure of the mission. Causing the rats to accidentally send the news to the port city that I want to attack, and then face the baptism of the great mage in the port. There is no doubt that there will be powerful magic waiting. He stood up and wiped the water. Tomorrow morning I will inform the Count, and then before the attack, send a team of vampires to find out the situation in the port city. I believe this mission is not difficult. When he walked out of the bathroom, he already had a complete idea. Even if there was a real archmage casting a spell with his dragon fighting spirit, it would be easy for him to defeat the archmage's magic. Back in the territory, he had even defeated a cheese super powerful water magic, water spiral fusion. And that was on the sea. After all, he was a half-dragon knight. It was almost dawn. The noisy port was very quiet. When List returned to the room, there were already 5 vampires sitting in the room. Seeing his arrival, Bloody Mary was the first to stand up, and the other 4 vampires reacted quickly and stood up, their eyes all focused on the door. List, who was 189 meters tall, was wearing a modified home suit, although it was slightly different from the usual aristocratic dress. However, it undoubtedly served to accentuate his tall, slender, and imposing aura of nobility. "You've all arrived?" He went to the table and sat down directly, not inviting the 5 vampires to sit, and slowly looked at the new vampires. Bloody Mary introduced these 4 vampires. Bloody Mary quickly said, "My lord, this is One-Eyed Wuxia." There was nothing much to introduce. They were all mixed-race vampires, basically the same strength as Bloody Mary. At night, they were great mage level, and during the day they fell to the level of mage. With the ability to transform into bats, it was easy for them to take on the role of scout, but their assassin ability was not outstanding. Unless they were drunk like List. Otherwise, when the Sky Knight was sleeping, he would also be vigilant, and the high-level fighting energy would naturally run slowly, waking him up at the slightest movement. If the vampires failed to assassinate, they might be killed instead. After all, he was just a spellcaster. Transforming into a bat was suitable for escaping, but it was still very dangerous for a knight's attack to sweep across a large area. It was very foolish for a spellcaster to engage in melee combat with a knight. 5 vampires, 3 men and 2 women. After the introduction, it was the turn of the 4 new vampires to report their situation, especially the result of coming to Iron Hoof Island to search for the Great Mage of Goat Congregation. Their information was similar to Bloody Mary's. They could not find the Great Mage, and as mixed race, they had not been in contact with the core of the Black Knight family. The information they could reveal was limited. Very good. I already know you, and you should know me. List did not waste time and said directly, "Your hearts are in my hands, and from now on, listen to my orders and serve me. I don't care about your loyalty, as long as you show your value. Even if you want your hearts back, it is not a problem." The 5 vampires rolled their eyes. List smiled slightly. "I put your hearts in a very secret place. You can try to steal them from me, but I have to remind you, there is only one chance, because if you fail, I will kill you. Also, when I sleep, I like to kill people in my dreams. Don't blame me for not reminding you." After that, he directly shook the bell on the table. The valet Thomas pushed the door open and came in. "Master, go and arrange rooms for these 5 mages. They are my new followers." "Yes, Master." Thomas gestured elegantly. "Sir Mage, please come with me." Chapter 606. The task of the vampires had come to an end. At dawn, the fleets anchored at the port of Oxford City left one after another. The sunset also followed the Tulip fleet and left the port. Sailing towards the Blue Sea, the vampires on the sunset had a new task. This was the first task that List gave them. Organize the blood magic you are familiar with into a book, specifically including the casting methods of each magic, as well as the reincarnation ritual and other comprehensive information. Also, the composition of the Black Knight family and other vampire families, The vampires were a little stunned. They did not know the meaning of this task. Only Bloody Mary, who thought she was smart, asked with sparkling eyes, "Does Sir want to establish a new vampire family?" List nodded in affirmation. Blood magic was strange. The blood of vampires was cold, and they needed to hide in dark places during the day to keep their body temperature cool. Cold-blooded usually meant treachery and betrayal. He did not know whether this was true or not, but this was the feeling that Bloody Mary and the other vampires gave him. Therefore, he did not want to establish a new vampire family, but it did not prevent him from using the gimmick of establishing a new family to motivate the 5 vampires to work. His original intention was to compile blood magic into a magic book. He would give it to Chi, Chris, and the others to study and draw meaningful inspiration from it, laying a foundation for them to become magic shooters. Chris estimated that they might not be talented enough, but Chi was very likely to become a magic shooter. In the following days, the 5 vampires hid in the bottom of the cabin, tossing and turning the book that List named The Essence and Development of Blood Magic. When they were about to reach the Roaring Estuary, the new battle plan had been submitted to all the Lord followers of the Sapphire Grand Duke. Lee William quickly gathered his followers, went to the Tulip for a meeting, and then assigned the tasks of the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry. "We will cooperate with the First Prince to attack the coast of the Roaring Estuary. Among all the cities near the sea, I chose Icepear City. It's the territory of a viscount. As far as I know, This Viscount has just been in theft to Ice Pear City in the last 2 years. His castle is Snow Pear Castle, and he himself is known as the Clearwater Sword Sage. Since he was called the Clearwater Sword Saint, he was naturally a Sky Knight of the Sword Saint level. He was probably a Water Sword Saint. Blade Master is just a Viscount? Jonas Gravel asked curiously. Perhaps he offended a great noble and was demoted to a Viscount. It is indeed possible. List was not curious about this. As a Dragon Knight, he was also a Viscount. So he said directly, although the opponent is a Sword Saint, the Viscount's castle can't stop the Blizzard Beast from dismantling it. Let's take Bing Pear City as a sacrifice first. William Lee understood List's strength, so he easily seconded the suggestion. Using the Sword Saint as the opening for this battle is the best. The meeting ended shortly after. After returning to the sunset, List gathered the 5 vampires who were working hard on the book. Let's put aside the task of writing the book. This is a long-term mission. There's no rush. Now, we are not far from the coastline. I need you to sneak into Ice Pear City and collect information, especially information about magicians. Ice Pear City? The fief of the Clearwater swordsman Yevich Waterpeanut? Night Demon Wimbledon blurted out. You know this person? Yes, my lord. I've heard of the Clearwater Sword Saint. He used to be a candidate for the Dragon Knight of the Eagle Kingdom, but he was too indulgent after he became an adult and wasted his talent. Furthermore, his character was also questionable. He had followed 3 marquises in succession, and in the end, he had fallen out with all of them. That was why I came to Furious Roar City and followed Marquis de Maria Rainflowerstone and was conferred the title of Viscount. There were many marquises in the Eagle Kingdom. Perhaps many nobles in the Eagle Kingdom did not know how many marquises there were. Just the area around the mouth of the Roaring Estuary included the territories of 5 marquises, and Marquis Wildwave was one of them. His territory was called the Battering River Plain, and its boundary was from the mouth of the Roaring River to the upstream tributary of the Three Dragons River. The main city was Furious Roar City. The name of the Roaring Estuary came from the Roaring River, which was a river much larger than the Yangtze River, the Nile River, and the Amazon River on Earth. The Battering River Plain downstream was also extremely vast. Ice Pear City was a small city on the Battering River Plain. Night Demon Wimbledon continued to introduce. The Clearwater Sword Saint is very powerful. As a candidate for the Dragon Knight, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to sneak in front of him. You don't need to face him directly. You just need to find out if there are any great magicians in the city. Yes, my lord. The vampires left the sunset at dusk and flew to Ice Pear City. List stood at the bow of the ship without any rest. Now they were only about 10 kilometers away from the land, and they could land and fight at any time. It was August 1st, and the night was still cool. Suddenly, a figure rushed over from the sky, and the magnificent fighting energy of water attribute filled the air. It was the Sea Sword Saint, Lee William. List turned around and greeted, "Father, why are you here?" Lee William waved his hand to signal the servants on the ship to leave. Only the father and son stayed at the bow. "Have you sent the vampires out?" "Yes." "List, what are you worried about? According to the usual practice, we should directly attack. This is just a small city. What does the Clearwater Sword Saint have that we should be cautious about?" "Father, it's better to fight slowly and surely. After all, he was once a candidate for the Dragon Knight." "A candidate for the Dragon Knight? I've asked the vampires." The Clearwater Sword Saint, Yevich Waterpeanut, was very talented when he was young and was one of the candidates for the Dragon Knight. But after he grew up, his talent was wasted and he had a bad character. He only became a Viscount when he was middle-aged. It seems that although he is down and out, he is still very powerful. We should be careful. Lee William nodded and sighed. The eldest prince should have taken some other small cities and started to rest on the land. I've lived on the ship for decades, but I'm still not used to it. I'm just waiting for one more night. Lee William did not plan to go back immediately after he boarded the ship. He looked at the tower at the stern of the ship and asked, "Your ship is very strange. Is that where you live?" "Yes." You're a nobleman who likes to enjoy life. Let me take a look at your room. When Li William entered the tower, he was still shocked by the condition of the room, even though he had been mentally prepared. There was a full set of thorny furniture, exquisite glass products, curtains made of green wool, and carpets made of World of Warcraft fur. Most importantly, the master bedroom was cool. It was only August, and the weather was still hot. However, List's room was cool. It was not hot at all. What's going on? A magic circle? Li William asked in surprise as he stood in the room and felt the cool temperature. It's a magic equipment. List smiled awkwardly, as if he had been caught stealing a chicken leg. In my territory, there is a kind of golden lip shell. The shell produces golden pearls, which can be used to make magic equipment that can control temperature. I call it the temperature-setting pearl. The production is very low now, so I only have one. What's the production of the golden pearls? List, I need it, Li William said with the dignity of a father. Of course, I won't take it for free. Just sell it to me according to the market price. You don't have to spend money. I was planning to give you and grandmother 2 temperature-setting pearls as a birthday gift. That's very kind of you, but only 2. I hope the bedroom, study, dining room, and even the living room can use temperature-setting pearls. The Count had a big appetite. List interrupted him. I'm sorry, father, but the supply of golden pearls is very low. Even my Thorn Castle can't meet the demand. How about this? As long as there are new golden pearls, I'll sell them to Tulip Castle first. He would definitely sell the golden pearls in the future, but he had to ensure his own enjoyment first. The Count could not force the issue. Seeing that List had no intention of giving him the temperature-setting pearl as a gift, he said, How about this? I'll share a room with you on the sunset. Do you mind? Of course. Chapter 607. List did not have to wait any longer. 5 vampires had flown back from Ice Pear City with the results of their investigation. Bloody Mary vaguely took over the leading position of the vampire servants. She reported, My Lord Count, we did not dare to approach the Clearwater swordsman, but we accidentally found that he was receiving 3 people dressed as magicians in the castle's living room. Through the Clearwater swordsman's attitude, we feel that they are of equal status. Equal status? List raised his eyebrows. A magician who could be equal to a sword sage was likely to be a great magician. Is there any other information? Judging from the situation we have inquired, it is very interesting that the Clearwater swordsman did not know that you were going to launch an attack. The defense of Snow Pear Castle is very loose. Before Bloody Mary could finish, Peggy suddenly interrupted her and said, But halfway through, a wretched person entered the living room and said something to the Clearwater swordsman. The Clearwater swordsman quickly ordered the castle to be under martial law, and many materials from Ice Pear City were also moved to Snow Pear Castle. List understood. It seems that Mouse leaked the news, and Snow Pear Castle is prepared. William frowned. There are 3 great magicians, and the Clearwater swordsman is also on guard. List, what do you think of this battle? He smiled faintly. List said lightly, Father, there is nothing to be surprised about. Gather at dawn to attack the castle. Snow Pear Castle has a sword sage and 3 great magicians, but Father and I, together with the Blizzard Beast squad, they are no match for us. Bloody Mary saw the opportunity and said, My lord, don't forget your vampire servants. At dawn, we should still be able to perform at the level of a great magician. Although there is no powerful range magic in blood magic, it should not be difficult to help you kill 1 or 2 great magicians. She had confidence in the strength of List, so she always expressed her loyalty. The other 4 vampires were a little reluctant, but they were held back by Bloody Mary and had to respond, Vampire servants are willing to serve my lord. List looked at the 5 vampires. It is good that you have this awareness, which means that you have accepted your situation. However, I don't want you to expose your identities. You can follow the orders of chivalry and watch the battle. Just take it as a backup. Before he finished speaking, he thought of something. Also, the name Vampire Servant doesn't sound good. From now on, You should change it to blood servant. The 5 vampires looked at each other. What was the difference between a vampire servant and a blood servant? They couldn't keep up with List's train of thought. The dawn was quiet. The tulip fleet quickly disembarked. The knights donned their equipment, mounted their horses, and assembled on the shore. Riding on Loki's back, List followed orders of chivalry towards Snow Pear Castle. He didn't hide his tracks. Just like that, they dashed towards Snow Pear Castle openly. List did not bother to use any tricks anymore. He was like a max-leveled main account leading a lower-leveled account to level up. In the eyes of the lower-leveled account, there was no difference between a boss and a monster in his eyes. Alt accounts had to pay attention to positioning, kiting, and so on. When a max-leveled main account fought a boss, it was a brainless attack. The patrolling knight of Snow Pear Castle soon discovered the orders of chivalry and fled back to the castle like the wind to report to the sword sage of Clear Water. So when orders of chivalry approached Snow Pear Castle, they were greeted by a silver-armored knight standing on the balcony at the top of the castle. Obviously, it was the sword sage of Clear Water, Yevich Waterpeanut, the former candidate for the Dragon Knight. He looked at the charging orders of chivalry of Coral Island with a cold glint in his eyes. What a terrible experience. Less than 2 years after coming to Ice Pear City, Sapphire's flies came to steal our food. But this time you picked the wrong opponent. Let me, Yevich, show you what pain is. He stamped his foot. A voice suddenly came from below the balcony. Don't worry, Viscount Yevich. We are ready to release magic together. If Sapphire's orders of chivalry dares to attack the castle, we will make them tremble in fear in the fireworks of magic. But after a round of magic, the free magic on the battlefield will be minced. Viscount Yevich will have to deal with the aftermath. The embodiment of sorcerers on the battlefield. It was similar to a magic scroll that could only be used once. It would be extinguished after 1 round of shooting. Orders of Chivalry's fighting spirit interfered too much with the magic in the surrounding space, which happened to restrain the sorcerers who needed to sense and absorb the free magic to release magic. In this continent dominated by night, it was not a coincidence that the spellcasters had declined. Yevich knew this, but he also believed that the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's Orders of Chivalry did not know that Snow Pear Castle had 3 great sorcerers. As long as the other side attacked the castle, a round of magic from the great sorcerers would definitely have a decisive effect. But he soon found that the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry stopped outside the castle. The leader was wearing silver armor and a red cloak, riding on the back of a long-legged bird, holding a cylinder in his hand and placing it on his eye. After a moment's pause, the knight in the lead put down the cylinder, and the Orders of Chivalry started again, charging towards Snow Pear Castle. Dust rose all over the sky. When the charge reached the magic range, Yevich stomped his feet. Without his reminder, the 3 great sorcerers hiding in the room below the balcony raised their hands and began to gather magic. A well-prepared magic baptism was about to be brewed and released. Yevich's mouth curved into a sarcastic smile. The water element fighting spirit was running in his body, surging and roaring, waiting for the moment to attack. The knight in the castle also held their weapons, waiting to beat the drowning enemy. On the opposite side, Coral City's Orders of Chivalry, List was in charge of the overall command of the battle. His magic eyes had not been interrupted. Through the telescope, he had already locked on the position of the 3 great sorcerers, as well as the flamboyant Clearwater swordsman. Under his command, the Orders of Chivalry began to charge. List kept watching the movements of the great sorcerers. When he saw them raising their hands to brew magic, List suddenly picked up the swift shadow bow, aimed at the window and shot 3 arrows. The arrows were enchanted with dragon fighting spirit. The arrows whistled through the air. Yevich, who was on the balcony, suddenly rushed towards the 3 arrows. He had no time to wonder how List found the great sorcerers in the castle and accurately shot the arrows, ready to shoot the great sorcerers who released magic. Boom! The water element fighting spirit collided with the fire element fighting spirit. The 3 arrows suddenly exploded, and the dragon warrior energy released instantly turned into 3 balls of flames, smashing Yevich's water warrior energy and bombarding his body, causing him to scream and fly away, crashing into the wall of the castle. The smile of a winner hung on List's face, and he was proud of himself. The sword sage could not even block one of his arrows. He put away the swift shadow bow and replaced it with a whistle. Whoosh! The sharp whistle reached the ears of the charging knight. In the next moment, the knights who were charging forward with great momentum turned their horses' heads together and moved to the left and right in an orderly manner at a speed faster than when they were charging. It was as if the Snow Pear Castle was a solid stone in the water, splitting the night torrent from the middle, but the split was a little far. At this time, the three great sorcerers had joined forces and released powerful magic, condensing on the path of the charging knight. But what made the three archmages want to vomit blood was that the charging knights actually turned around and ran away halfway. This meant that they had made a mistake in their judgment. The joint magic that they had been preparing for a long time was completely useless. What was more terrible was that the Clearwater swordsman was shot by an arrow and hung on the wall. Chapter 608. This chapter is for the leader legendary battle song. 1 chapter for now, and 10 chapters later. This is battle songs all to count again. Rumble! Thunder roared and lightning flashed, the wind blew, and the rocks flew. This was a magic released by three great wizards, which could be regarded as a combination magic. The open space in front of the castle instantly fell into a doomsday-like scene. Unfortunately, such a powerful magic could only ravage the ground. Orders of chivalry of Coral City, who should have been ruthlessly ravaged, had already run away from the range of the magic, hiding in the distance, pointing and marveling at such a powerful magic. What a beautiful scene! If time could stop, I really want to preserve such a scene as a beautiful memory. Wizards are still very powerful. Fortunately, Sir List was prepared, otherwise we would have to go in and take a bath. No matter how powerful it is, it's useless if it can't hit. Behind Orders of Chivalry, in the logistics team belonging to the Retainer Knight, the 5 vampires were not surprised to see the disaster-like magic scene in the distance. In the night, they were also at the level of great wizards. What really surprised them was the scene of List shooting the Sword Saint of Clearwater with one arrow. No matter how Bloody Mary publicized the horror of List and how he killed the pureblood vampire Tubert Black Knight, these vampires were more afraid of having their hearts pinched by List, but they were not convinced of his strength. They even thought of assassinating him in the dark. However, at this moment many thoughts were crushed in an instant. The one-eyed Wuxia muttered to himself, "That's the Sword Saint, a candidate for the Dragon Knight. How could he not block an arrow? Just how powerful was this lord? Could it be that Mary's words about him instantly killing Tubert were true? How is it possible? He is only 18 years old and has just become a Sky Knight." Knight Demon Wimbledon was confused. Has Yevich's strength declined? It must be that Yevich's strength has declined. Yes, it must be that Yevich's strength has declined. But, even if his strength has declined, he is still a Sky Knight. Why couldn't he even block an arrow? Bloody Peppa and Bloody Hamel were shocked speechless. Only Bloody Mary giggled. Peggy, Hamel, Wimbledon, so I didn't lie to you guys, right? His strength is unfathomable. Then, she licked her coquettish red lips and said with a charming expression, "Compared to Tubert, that perverted pure blood, such a person is worth following. I, Bloody Mary, will definitely build a vampire family for you, and become your eyes and ears in the dark." No one knew how the ancient vampires survived. When the night ruled the world, the vampire families existed as vassals of the great nobles. They called themselves vampiric servants. As a vampire, relying on the strong was part of his instinct. Behind List, the Count was also riding his horse, away from the Orders of Chivalry, ready for a sword fight at any time. He looked at his second son's tall and straight back, and his worldview was once again refreshed. Back then, during the actual combat practice, he was already powerless to resist. Now, it seemed that List's strength had increased crazily again, to the point where a Sword Saint couldn't resist one arrow. If a Sword Saint couldn't resist one arrow, how many arrows could a perfect Sky Knight? If a perfect Sky Knight couldn't resist, then what kind of existence was List at his current level? There was a stormy guess in his heart, and countless thoughts rolled in his mind. But in the end, it turned into a sigh, and he suppressed all the thoughts at the bottom of his heart. No matter what the future would be, the present was the most important. His lifelong wish was to achieve military merits, be promoted to a noble, and strengthen the Tulip family. Liszt, who had already been in theft, was destined to separate from the Tulip family. As for how it would develop, the Count felt that he didn't need to ask. Good fortune and misfortune were closely related. No one could tell what would happen in the future. After a few breaths, the doomsday-like magic slowly receded. The doomsday-like magic had slowly receded, and Liszt's second wave of arrows turned into 3 flames, rushing towards the castle window. However, the magician who had been hiding in the room had hurriedly hid in the depths of the castle, not daring to show up to cast spells again. Boom! The arrow burst open in the window, blasting a big gap. The Clearwater Sword Saint, who was originally hanging on the wall, rushed into the castle during the gap between the great magicians casting and hid inside, not daring to show up. Whoosh! The whistle sounded, which was the signal to charge. The orders of chivalry of the Coral City regrouped and launched a real charge against Schwelly Castle. Countless archers shot arrows wildly around the castle. Their dochi frantically tore the free magic in the air around the castle, creating an anti-magic space. There were only sporadic arrow counterattacks from the castle. Dosen, it's time for you to appear. With the call of Liszt, the long-awaited Blizzard Beast pair made a grand appearance. 9 huge black dogs, surrounded by the orders of chivalry, came to the front of Schwelly Castle and madly spewed rock thorns and rock grenades. Every rock bombarded the castle wall, shattering a large piece of stone. The wall was like sand, peeling off layer by layer. After a while, one side of the wall collapsed, and the howling Coral Island Knight rushed to the gap like a bee pupa. Liszt and Lee William were no exception, rushing into the gap side by side. The Sky Cutter sword was in his hand. The dragon's dochi surged and transformed into a flame armor covering his whole body. The knights who were blocking the gap were unable to put up any resistance. The blade easily cut through like tofu, and 7 or 8 Earth Knights were cut in half on the spot. The upper and lower bodies were separated, and looking at their split appearance, there was a special visual pleasure. Earl Lee William was not willing to let his son steal the limelight. The water attribute dochi also gushed out freely, and the sword swept up several knights blocking the way, instantly distorting the knight's body and strangling them with the power of dochi. 2 Sky Knights opened the way. Following that, countless elite Earth Knights picked up the loopholes and cleared the battlefield. The resistance of Schwelly Castle collapsed in just a moment. Such a scene of torture and killing. A knight's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He hurriedly threw away his weapon and knelt down to beg for mercy. With someone taking the lead, the rest of the knight knelt down one by one. The Knight of Coral Island Orders of Chivalry was tied up and captured. Where is Yevich? Liszt grabbed the armor of a knight and asked. The knight was shrouded by the dragon's dochi. He felt a huge force firmly binding him, as if he was nailed to the ground, unable to move or breathe. Terrified, he did not dare to hide anything. He replied with difficulty, "Sir, no, Yevich went to the castle's back garden. He may be trying to break out." Leaving the knight, Liszt said, "Father, I'll leave this place to you. I'll go after Yevich. Don't forget there are still 3 great wizards. The great wizards can't escape." Although Liszt did not know where the great wizards were hiding, the knight's dochi had completely banned magic in Schwelly Castle. Great wizards who could not release magic were as good as useless, and it was only a matter of time before they were found. The most urgent task now was to catch Yevich. He had not caught a sacred swordsman alive so far. After catching him, he could at least squeeze a few sprites out of him. Once a Sky Knight was captured, the ransom would not be a few gold coins. Chapter 609. Liszt rushed through the gap in the castle and ran all the way to the back garden of the castle. He used the Eye of Magic but did not find Yevich Waterpeanut. But under a patch of grapevines, he saw a few servants hiding something. Liszt sensed that something was wrong. He rushed over and grabbed one of the servants. "Where is Yevich?" Without waiting for the servant to answer, he kicked away the water jar that the servant used to store water. Suddenly, a square well cover was revealed. I don't know." "Stupid." List threw the uncooperative servant to the stone table. The servant fell on it and rolled on the ground. He could not get up for a while. Usually, he was not willing to kill ordinary people except for knight and sorcerers. War was a game between nobles. Civilians were usually part of the wealth. It was morally unacceptable for a knight to kill civilians. If the civilians dared to resist, they would be killed. Furthermore, even if there were moral restraints, there would still be knights who would kill indiscriminately in the heat of the moment. There was no punishment afterward. For example, now that List had killed all the civilians in Snowpear Castle, no one would say anything bad about him. However, he was not a tyrannical person. He had some sympathy for the civilians, whether a knight was moral or not. In the end, it was all about self-restraint and the glorious words of the knight's glory. Fortunately, List did not need the servant's answer. He kicked open the well cover and quickly jumped down. It was obvious that this cellar was the escape tunnel of the castle. He activated the dragon's fighting and took out a crystal lamp. He quickly found the tunnel entrance. With the protection of the dragon's fighting, he was not afraid of the traps in the tunnel. This world had not developed the art of mechanism yet. Even if there were traps in the escape tunnel, they were very simple killing methods. If there were really magic equipment in the escape tunnel, he could see and crack it with his eye of magic. The tunnel was a little narrow. List had the crystal lamp to illuminate the tunnel. His vision was not blocked, so he quickly rushed down the tunnel. The tunnel was a little winding, and there was water in many places. He could clearly see fresh, wet footprints. It's not the footprints of one person. They are a little messy. It should be Yevich and the 3 sorcerers' footprints. Now that he understood, he couldn't help but quicken his pace. Right at this moment, a loud rumble suddenly sounded from ahead. Then he heard a very faint sound. It sounded like cursing. He continued to charge forward. Soon, at the end of the passageway, 3 silhouettes could be seen. They were the 3 great mages who had launched the combination magic. Their cursing could be heard clearly, and List quickly understood the reason. It turned out that Yevich had blown up the gate at the end of the passage. That was to say, in order to escape, Yevich threw down the 3 great magicians as bait. "Stop talking nonsense, Lars. Let's work together and release magic to bombard the top of the passageway to open up a path out. Cyril, raise the rock armor for me. Delaka, raise the water wave shield for me. I'm afraid I'll be buried if the tunnel collapses again." "Don't worry, you won't die." The 3 great magicians blocked the passage, trying to think of a way to save themselves. Unfortunately, before they could release their magic, List had already rushed over to them along the passage. "My friends, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Follow me back to Snowpear Castle." "It's you! You shot down Yevich's knight with 1 arrow. Sure enough, he's already here, haha." List stared at the 3 great magicians with his eye of magic and slowly approached them. "Since you already know who I am, there's no need to be polite anymore. Follow the passage back to Snowpear Castle and we'll have a good chat. The mage on the left, don't secretly gather magic. Your actions can't escape my senses." The great mage who was discovered smiled awkwardly and dispersed the magic gathered in his palm. When a mage was approached by a knight, a very powerful sky knight at that, he was no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. The era of spellcasters had declined. It was said that the mages of the Moon Empire were very powerful and dominated the continent. Unfortunately, it was the era of the knight that dominated the continent. Sometimes, List suspected that the legendary magic shooters could fight with dragons. Although they could not defeat the Dragon Knight alone, they were still the representative of the world's peak power. Why were the great mages and great mages so weak? Although they could release powerful magic, they could not show their real fighting ability. Especially the restriction of casting speed, which allowed the knight to attack the mages unscrupulously. No matter how powerful the magic was, it was meaningless if it could not hit the knight. No matter how strong the defensive magic such as the water wave shield or rock armor was, it would be broken by the knight in a short time. Not to mention that the knight formed a team, their fighting energy could mince the drifting magic and form an anti-magic area, directly destroying the mage's ability to cast spells. Looking at the three great mages dejectedly walking back along the passage, Liszt could not help but sigh in his heart. When I was writing Dragon's Fight in the Wild, I read a lot of magic books and knight novels. They all mentioned the glory of the Moon Empire. There was even a legend that the mages of the Moon Empire built a magic array leading to the moon on the peak of Miragadon Mountain. If that era was really like the recorded history, it was definitely a glorious and brilliant civilization. The mages who created the Moon Empire would obviously not be as weak as the current mages. So what caused the decline of the mages era? Is there any difference between the mages of today and the mages of the Moon Empire? After the collapse of the Moon Empire, what happened that allowed the rise of the knight? Unfortunately, no one recorded the history. The sporadic oral rumors had long deviated from the truth. The mystery was difficult to solve. Liszt did not go after the Sword Saint of Clearwater. Since the passage was blocked, there was basically no hope of catching up with the Sword Saint. He felt it was a pity that the reward for capturing the Sword Saint had flown away. However, the three great mages as captives could make up for the loss a little. He believed that they would pay enough ransom for their freedom. When he returned to Snow Pear Castle, the Earl had already sent people to start cleaning the castle, which had a collapsed wall. Didn't Yevich catch up? He escaped through the tunnel and even destroyed the exit of the tunnel. But he left us three guests. Liszt pointed to the three great mages in magic cloaks. Although they were prisoners, the three of them still maintained their arrogant posture, calmly waiting for the next trial. Liszt handed over the leadership of the trial to the Earl. He was going to search Snow Pear Castle himself to see if Yevich had left anything valuable behind. According to the original arrangement, the military achievements would be given to Lee William, and the resources would be given to Liszt. So all the resources in Snow Pear Castle belonged to Liszt. Commander Marcus had already sorted out the resources. When he saw Liszt coming back, he immediately came to report, "My lord, the food and other resources in the castle have been sealed up, except for the replenishment of the orders of chivalry. We are looking for carriages to transport them back." "Where are the elves?" "We have searched the worm room. There are no elves left. They should have been taken away by Yevich." Chapter 610. After patrolling around the castle, he did not find anything special. The assets of the Clearwater Sword Saint Yevich Waterpeanut were so poor that he did not look like a sword saint. The materials in Snow Pear Castle were not even as rich as those in Gravel Castle and Beer Castle, which made Liszt quite despise. Of course, he was not so angry that he really cut the worm stalks. The Night War was a noble game, although there were no explicit rules that must be followed in the war. But just like the Geneva Convention signed by all countries on Earth to protect civilians and war victims, under the knight system, there was also a set of rules that belonged to the spirit and character of a knight. The spirit and character of a knight were publicized differently in different countries, but in general, there were slogans such as loyalty, fearlessness, courage, honesty, justice, protection of territory, and glory. There was no propaganda, but it was real, such as the prohibition of killing captives. Gold coins could be used to redeem a knight, the prohibition of hurting elves, the prohibition of killing civilians, the prohibition of traitors, the need to ensure the purity of their children's blood, and so on. Once, the king of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom sent troops to the duke's palace because a duke of a duchy liked to kill civilians. In the end, the duke was deprived of his title, but the kingdom did not abolish the duchy, but supported the duke's younger brother to inherit the title. Of course, it was more likely that the duke had a conflict with the kingdom than that the duke liked to kill civilians. But killing civilians was the best excuse for the duke to send troops. Liszt also followed these rules. He did not want to destroy them. After all, killing the elf wormstalks would hurt the vitality, which would affect the final production. Even transplantation would not work. If the elves were away from the wormstalks for too long, the wormstalks would gradually wither. Although the elves could breed new wormstalks, they would also hurt their vitality and would probably die prematurely. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire wanted to plunder enough resources every time it issued an expansion order, so it could not consume elves and other resources at will. Otherwise, after several expansion orders, no nobles would be willing to reclaim the coastal hinterland. In fact, with the continuous invasion of the expansion orders, several coastal hinterlands of the Eagle Kingdom that were often plundered had given birth to many nobles who did not produce. These nobles secretly supported mercenary groups to engage in serf trade and various smuggling trades to escape moral condemnation. For example, the civilians of those towns were generally free from the ravages of war. Unfortunately, if the knights didn't come to destroy them, the mercenaries would still come to plunder. It was not hard to imagine that without the protection of Snow Pear Castle, Ice Pear City would soon be attacked by mercenary groups. But these were not problems that List was willing to worry about. He stood on the second floor of the castle, looking at the grapevines in the backyard, still regretting Yevich's escape. It seems that many castles have tunnels. I should also build a tunnel in Thorn Castle. Building a tunnel to the sea would make it convenient for me to see a chi, and also convenient for me to escape from the sea. If he escaped into the sea, he would have loathed the rainbow whale to breathe. Even the Dragon Knight wouldn't be able to hit him, except for the Water Dragon Knight. The Water Dragon was an elemental dragon after all. Perhaps the Dragon Knight could breathe underwater. While sighing with emotion, another ball of distorted smoke floated in front of him. Mission completed. Reward: a hand-drawn map of the ruins. Yevich had escaped, and the three great wizards had become prisoners. Mission completion was a matter of course. Moreover, List believed that the map of the ruins was in the hands of the three great wizards. If he wanted it, he could get it at any time. The battle achievements belonged to the Count, the resources belonged to him, and the map of the ruins was obviously also his. He began to focus on the next mission. This was already the 126th mission. Mission: the escaped Yevich Water Peanut is unwilling. Perhaps he is waiting for you in the next city. If you want to plunder the resources to attack the river plain, a great battle is bound to happen. Please capture or kill Yevich. Reward: an Iron Knight. The content of the mission was nothing special. It generally developed along the way. What surprised him was the mission reward: an Iron Knight. So, the city that Yevich fled to should be Steel Dam City, and there is an Iron Knight in Steel Dam City? Steel Dam City was the next target of the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry. The Iron Knight was a type of knight. They cultivated a special Do-Chi secret manual and could forge all kinds of divine weapons. The Red Blood Sword, the Sky Cutter Greatsword, the Swift Shadow Bow, and other weapons were all forged by the Iron Knight. Wizards made magic equipment, such as gem pendants, amplification bracelets, wind beads, and so on. The Iron Knight forged all kinds of gem weapons, mithril armors, elven weapons, dragon bones, and other weapons. The magic equipment made by wizards stimulated the magic power of the materials themselves in the form of magic arrays, thereby forming special effects and power. The weapons forged by the Iron Knight were forged by combining the materials with the weapons, and then through special forging methods, they were suitable for the knight to pour chi into them, triggering the magic power resonance of the materials themselves, and displaying formidable power. Magic equipment could be stimulated as long as there was magic power, and it was not limited to chi or magic. Gem weapons, elven weapons, and so on the other hand, required chi to stimulate them, otherwise they would not be able to display their power. Training an Iron Knight consumed a lot of resources. Generally, only the great nobles would choose the talented young knight of their territories and train them into an Iron Knight. Even many Iron Knights themselves were the children of great nobles. The grandson of the Bull Marquis had also become an Iron Knight at a young age. It was because of this that List deduced that he was very talented. I hope that this Iron Knight can bring me the method of training an Iron Knight. An Iron Knight alone is not much. The systematic training method he mastered is really valuable. Back in the castle, the Count had finished interrogating the three great magicians. Lars Truth, Solaire Truth, Delaka Truth. These were the names of the three great magicians. Although they were all magicians of the Eagle Kingdom, they came from different places. Half a year ago, at a magician's gathering, they walked to the same stall. The other party was an ordinary magician, and he took out a map of the ruins that was about to decay and sell it. Lars explained expressionlessly, "That is a moon language map. After our appraisal, it is a map left behind by the Moon Empire, and it points to a lost civilization. All three of us took a fancy to this map, and none of us wanted to give it up. Finally, we decided to study it together." Solaire added, "The map is incomplete. The magician told us that he found it in the ruins of an ancient wizard tower, so we spent all our savings to excavate the ruins of the wizard tower. From the ruins of the wizard tower, they did not find the other part of the incomplete map, but according to the clues left behind in the ruins of the wizard tower, they successfully completed the incomplete map and drew a map that was not very accurate. The map pointed to the roaring estuary. According to our research, during the Moon Empire, most of the area of the roaring estuary was actually the sea. The lost civilization that the map pointed to was a strange race living in the sea. The Moon Empire had trade with this strange race, so we came here to find this strange race. A race in the sea." Chapter 6:11. Liszt suppressed his thoughts and asked, "Have you found the lost civilization on the map?" Lars Truth expressed regret. "We can roughly be sure that the lost civilization should be somewhere offshore in the roaring estuary, but it is too difficult to find it." Delaka Truth then sighed. "The Moon Empire was a great civilization thousands of years ago. Even it disappeared. The lost civilization should have been destroyed in the sea long ago. For many years, there has been no movement on the sea except for the people of Sapphire. It is very difficult for us to find it from the sea. It was difficult to do anything without money, so they had the idea of the coastal aristocrats, preparing to let the aristocrats invest in their research and excavation work. The sword saint of Clearwater, Yevich Waterpeanut, promised to fund them. Who knew that we would encounter Sapphire's exploration order? If I had known, I wouldn't have rushed here. But you still came. Yes, the desire for knowledge drove us to come here at the wrong time, and we suffered the wrong treatment." Serial Truth complained. He was brooding about being a prisoner. Liszt did not care about the attitude of the three archmages. He put away the hand-drawn map of the ruins and the map research notes they carried with them. He said calmly, "I have received the map of the ruins. Now let's talk about the ransom of the three of you." "I'm sorry, sir. The only wealth the three of us have is the map in your hand. In addition, not only do we have no extra money, but we also owe a lot of money to several archmages. I'm afraid you won't get the ransom you want from us. We shouldn't have been involved in the Night's War." When Charles spoke, the other two archmages nodded in agreement. "Well, can't pay the ransom. Originally, as archmages, I wouldn't have made things difficult for you if you didn't participate in the Night's War. But you have already used magic and joined this exploration order war. So the rules are the rules. You can't escape just because you're not a knight. But we really can't pay the ransom. The ransom is not only in the form of gold coins." Liszt said lightly. From the moment he found out that these three people were poor, he had already thought about how to treat them. "There are other forms. For example, knowledge is wealth in my eyes. You can use knowledge to exchange for freedom. If you don't have enough knowledge, working for me is also a way to obtain freedom. Sir, you can tell us in detail what kind of knowledge can exchange for our freedom. All the knowledge in your heads, such as the development of the mages in the Eagle Kingdom, the spellcasting plans that you have mastered, and the magic experiments that you have researched all year round. However, the value of knowledge is not high. Your best choice is to work for me." "Sir, are you going to worship us?" "Not worshipping, but working for me for free." "You should know very well that knight who can't pay the ransom will be thrown into the mines to mine, or forced into the workshops to do odd jobs. I need you to create magic equipment, create magic potions, and teach magic apprentices." Without waiting for the three archmages to respond, he added, "Let's put the specific ransom plan aside for now. We'll talk about it in detail after the expedition order is over. You need to spend a few days in confinement on the ship. Think carefully about what knowledge you have to offer. The more knowledge you have, the shorter your working years will be in the future. After that, Liszt no longer paid attention to the three, and directly ordered his subordinate knight to take them away. There were naturally tools to imprison the mages on the ship. He wanted these archmages to calm down first, to wear away their arrogance, and to understand how precious freedom was. After all, in his eyes, the mages were psychopaths, and he needed to spend effort and time to reform them. Otherwise, if he let them work for him, sooner or later there would be a rebellion like the dragon-slaying incident. The matter of the mages had been dealt with. For the time being, there was no intention to explore the map of the ruins. The expedition order was the only task now. Father, the knight that was sent out should have uprooted all the noble castles under the jurisdiction of Ice Pear City. We can finish the cleanup work tomorrow. According to my guess, Yevich should have escaped to Steel Dam City. We should strike first and capture several castles before Marquis Nuteo can react. He couldn't wait to capture or kill Yevich alive. The Count, however, hesitated. Marquis Nuteo's orders of chivalry are guarding the impact plane. If we advance too rashly, we will easily become the target of his attack. Should we slow down and let the other aristocrats act first as a cover for us? The Coral Island orders of chivalry only had more than 1,000 knight, which was difficult to confront the Marquis forces. Speed is the most important thing in war. Only by constantly plundering can we get enough merit and seize the opportunity for Father to be promoted to Marquis. I have blood servants to investigate the enemy's forces, blizzard beasts to attack the city, and my own powerful strength. Who can stop us? Liszt was very arrogant and bewitched. What level of strength have you reached? The Count asked casually. Liszt replied after some deliberation. He's definitely not as good as Marquis Bull back then, but the gap isn't that big. There were only two people in the room, the Count and Liszt. After a moment of silence, the Count asked again. Marquis Bull stole the power of the Sapphire Dragon and transformed it into the legendary Lich, which gave him great strength. So, my son, can you tell me why you are so strong? You were just an Earth Knight half a year ago. He didn't intend to ask, but in the end he couldn't hold it back. The impact of the arrow that shot the holy swordsman in the morning has not subsided until now. Faced with this question, Liszt fell silent for a while. He got a fire dragon and became a dragon knight. It should have been the way of the king. However, relying on the smoke missions to constantly stir the threads of fate, the development of the territory was booming. His own cultivation was getting stronger, and he had obtained various treasures. In particular, the seven-colored whale Lolth and the Sirenid Chi allowed him to retreat into the sea and escape with peace of mind. There was no desperate crisis. This bred the restlessness in his heart. If he didn't show off for a day, he would feel uncomfortable all over. He was like a nouveau riche, every day thinking about wearing a watch, a ring, a big gold chain, and showing off his wealth everywhere. The ancient overlord Xiong Yu once said, "Wealth does not return to its hometown, like wearing silk clothes at night, who knows?" This was a very vivid description of Liszt's mentality. Who would know how beautiful your clothes were if you wore gorgeous clothes and had to walk at night? Of course, Liszt could disguise himself, like an ordinary sky knight, and farm on the island step by step. Eventually, his wings would be full and he would soar into the sky again. But this was not his style. Everyone's pursuit of life was different. What he enjoyed was the shocked expression of others. After a long time, just when the Count thought that Liszt was not going to answer. Chapter 6:12. Ice Pear City was the Viscount's fief, and Snow Pear Castle was the Viscount's castle. Steel Dam City was the Count's fief, and the castle was called Little River Heart Castle. The Count's name was Deborah Yuwashi, known as the River-Severing Sword Saint. It was said that he once cut a roaring river with his sword. He was the nephew of Marquis de Maria Yuwashi, but he was not Lord Yevich. The Clearwater Sword Saint was a follower of the Marquis. When the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry came to Little River Heart Castle, Count Lee William suddenly felt troubled. No wonder it is called Little River Heart Castle. This is clearly a castle built on the river island. It is too difficult to capture this castle, especially these 4 stone bridges across the river. Orders of Chivalry is simply a live target when they charge. Little River Hardcastle was connected to the river bank by 4 stone bridges, each of which was about enough for 4 horses to drive side by side. List only glanced at it. With a plan in mind, he immediately said, "Since we can't capture it, then we will tear down these 4 stone bridges and isolate Little River Hardcastle from the river bank. This can lead to Deborah. If Deborah doesn't come out, we will attack other castles. That's also the way." Naturally, he had to find the Blizzard Beast squad to tear down the bridge. "Dosen!" List called out, and Dosen immediately took his 8 sons to the front of the stone bridge and obeyed the command. "Aim at the pier and release rock grenades." Woof! The Blizzard Beast squad, which was already more disciplined than a police dog, suddenly released rock grenades one after another, constantly bombarding the pier of the stone bridge. Even though the stone bridge was extremely strong, it was still constantly exploding under the ruthless destruction of the rock grenades. As long as it continued for a while, it would inevitably collapse. List rode on the back of the chocobo Loki, silently watching Little River Hardcastle. The goal of his mission was in this castle. Last night, the blood servants had come to investigate. Although they did not dare to get too close because there were 2 sword saints guarding, they still found Yevich's figure. And just as he was watching the castle, there were also people in the castle staring at him. One of them was the Clearwater sword sage, Yevich, and the younger one was the river-slaying sword sage, Deborah. "Count Deborah, this list of Sapphire is very powerful. I was ambushed by his arrow and almost lost my life on the city wall of Snow Pear Castle. You should defend Little River Hardcastle and wait for Great River Hardcastle to send orders of chivalry to rescue you instead of choosing to attack rashly. Viscount Yevich." Deborah turned his head and looked at Yevich beside him, a disdainful smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. "You were only ambushed by that list's arrow. Don't tell me you're scared out of your wits?" The corner of Yevich's mouth twitched. "I'm telling the truth. You should know that I was once a candidate for the Dragon Knight. I won't be vague about the opponent's strength." Deborah snorted. "You were, but you're no longer." Yevich clenched his fists and suppressed his anger. "No matter what, I still advise you to defend Little River Hardcastle instead of attacking. The opponent is smashing my bridge. Those 4 Earth element World of Warcraft are too big of a threat to the stone bridge. You should understand that the cost of building these 4 stone bridges is equal to half of the castle." Deborah suddenly pulled out the sword hanging at his waist, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. "Pass my orders. Orders of chivalry are to immediately prepare and charge with me." "Yes, my lord." The knight standing behind him immediately received the order and left. Deborah looked at Yevich again. "I wasn't selected as a candidate for the Dragon Knight, but I have never lost my courage. Yevich, if you don't want me to look down on you, show me your courage and fight alongside me. I want all the flies of Sapphire to die in my territory." After saying that, he stared directly at Yevich. The meaning in his eyes was clear. If Yevich dared to retreat, then he would no longer have a place to stand in the river plain. Deborah was the nephew of Di Maria, Marquis of Raging Waves. He was different from the average follower. At least it was not difficult to make Yevich leave. Yevich took a deep breath. Suppressing the fear of the arrow from the day before yesterday, he nodded and said, "Since you insist, I will prove my courage." "Very good." A moment later, while List was still directing the Blizzard Beast squad to bombard the stone bridge, the castle gate of Little River Hardcastle had opened. Orders of chivalry instantly launched a charge, shouting slogans and gushing chi. They raised their knight spears high and rushed to the 4 wide, solid stone bridges. "Dosen, fall back." List made a prompt decision to withdraw the Blizzard Beast squad and stay away from the other end of the stone bridge. Behind him, Count Lee William had also directed the Orders of Chivalry of Coral Island to line up to meet the attack. "Block the stone bridge. Never let them rush over. Charge! Charge!" The torrent of horses and armors was launched. A contest between the Orders of Chivalry was about to begin. List patted the chocobo Loki on the neck. Loki clucked and immediately spread its wings, released levitation, and flew into the sky. He was looking for Yevich. Orders of chivalry would charge, and the Sky Knight would generally stand by, so List quickly found Yevich riding on the back of a horse. Yevich also happened to look up and saw the chocobo flying in the sky. His body suddenly shook, and the image of the heart-rending arrow appeared in his mind. The golden-armored knight next to him followed Yevich's gaze and saw List as well. He didn't tremble, but just stared at List with a burning gaze, as if he was silently issuing a challenge. Interesting. List, riding on Loki's back, was not in a hurry. He was calculating the distance, a distance that would make it impossible for the two to escape back to the castle. He did not want to let Yevich escape again. Boom! At the other end of the stone bridge, the two orders of chivalry finally collided. The Blizzard Beast squad had already withdrawn, so this was a head-on clash between the orders of chivalry. Two groups of chi intertwined in an instant. The knight's spear penetrated the formation, and in an instant, dozens of knights were overturned by the spear. However, List did not pay attention to this battle. With the Count watching, the charge would never fail. He just silently calculated the distance. When Yevich and Deborah stepped on the middle of the stone bridge, they were already some distance away from Castle Heart. His eyebrows suddenly raised, and the high-level fire attribute dragon chi instantly ran in his body. His body had already jumped off Loki's back and swooped down to the middle of the stone bridge. There was no fear, nor was he too hot-blooded. He just wrapped himself in an invincible posture, pulled out the Sky Cutter sword, and performed the sunset fall that he had already mastered long ago. He had mastered all 5 moves of the Red Sun Rising Fire, and they had become part of his body instincts. With a whistling sound, the dragon chi turned into flames and draped over his body. It was like a sunset falling to the horizon. On the stone bridge, Yevich, who was always paying attention to List, immediately exclaimed when the other jumped off the back of the big bird. "He is coming, Deborah, he is coming! You dare to fight 1 against 2? Courting death." Deborah pulled out his knight's sword with a backhand, and with his chi gushing out, he had already flown into the sky. Although he was called the River Cutter Sword Saint, he was a Thunder Sword Saint. His body flashed with thunder and lightning as he fearlessly faced the falling fire of List. On the other side, with trembling hands, Yevich clenched his teeth and similarly operated his water chi, following Deborah as he flew into the sky. He constantly hypnotized himself. Maybe he is just strong in archery. Me and Deborah are 2 Sky Knights. He absolutely can't take advantage of us. But the next moment, in his field of vision, List and Deborah had already collided. Without waiting for him to successfully hypnotize himself and adjust his mentality, Deborah, who had been full of confidence just a moment ago, screamed and was sent flying in the sky. He fell on the stone bridge at a speed 3 times faster than when he flew into the sky. With a loud bang, a large cloud of dust was kicked up. Seeing this, the courage that Yevich had just mustered receded like the tide. His eyes were wide open, and he forcibly reversed his chi, forcibly stopping his flight. He turned around and fled towards Little River Heart Castle. But just as he fled a certain distance, he heard a violent whistling sound in his ears. Then, a scorching aura hit his body. Ah! The same scream. He couldn't help but imitate Deborah's previous actions, falling at high speed and fiercely smashing into the ground. Even if the Sky Knight had a strong physique, such a fall still caused his internal organs to churn, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. Enduring the bone-shattering pain all over his body, he prepared to get up and continue running. Chapter 613. You can't escape. I knew this would be the result. Yevich Waterpeanut, who had been trampled on the ground, was full of self-reproach. With my eyesight as a Dragon Knight candidate, how could I have been wrong? How could I have been wrong? Your strength is so terrifying. So terrifying. List lifted his foot and turned his head to the other side. River-slaying sword Saint Deborah Yuwashi had already crawled up from the ground, ready to escape. His so-called courage had disappeared without a trace in the face of a single strike, replaced by confusion and the desire to escape. "Stay here and lie down," List casually instructed Yevich, then got up and flew straight at Deborah. How could he not accept a captive that had been delivered to his doorstep? Seeing List rush over, Deborah's scalp immediately tingled. Thunder Chi erupted without restraint, turning his speed into a bolt of lightning. Thunder Chi increased one's speed, but List only had Fire Chi. Although he had already upgraded it to Dragon Chi and his flying speed wasn't slower than his opponents, the disparity in the starting point caused him to be left behind by Deborah. But he wasn't the slightest bit anxious, directly switching to the swift shadow bow. An arrow was knocked, and the bow was drawn into a full moon. Releasing his hand, 3 flames streaked across the sky, heading straight for Deborah. Deborah naturally noticed List shooting arrows. Originally, at the level of a Sky Knight, archery was already useless in a duel. How could a flying knight be unable to dodge the arrows? He was just about to ridicule his opponent's brain when he suddenly recalled what Yevich had said. He had almost been killed by his opponent's arrow. At that time, Deborah absolutely didn't believe Yevich's words. Even a perfect Sky Knight couldn't kill a sword saint. But now he didn't dare not believe it. He hastily twisted his body, trying to avoid the trajectories of the 3 flame-like arrows. He was proficient in archery and knew that the arrows shot by a knight all had the effect of changing trajectories. But he had already overestimated the trajectories of the 3 flame-like arrows, dodging more than 10 meters away. However, when the 3 arrows collided with each other, they seemed to be tracking him and shot toward him again. The speed of a human was obviously not as fast as the speed of an arrow, so it was impossible to dodge. While Deborah was horrified, he roused his whole body's Do Chi to resist this arrow. When the arrow came into contact with his Do Chi, boom! With an explosion, List detonated the dragon's battle Chi attached to the arrow without hesitation. Not only had the majority of the explosion's shockwave bombarded Deborah's body, it had also accelerated the 3 arrowheads. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. All of them pierced through Deborah's golden armor and pierced into his body. Ah! Deborah screamed and fell from the sky again. He couldn't block List's attack from the front, and he couldn't block List's arrow from a distance. This was the difference between the Dragon Knight and the Sky Knight. Falling to the ground, Deborah resisted the pain of the 3 arrowheads piercing into his body and struggled to get up. But then he was kicked back to the ground by List, who had descended from the sky. His body was ravaged once more, and he let out an even more painful ah. In the distance, Yevich, who was in a dilemma, was so frightened by this scream that he didn't dare to move. Just a moment ago, he discovered that List had gone to chase after Deborah and that he himself wasn't bound. For him, this was a heaven-sent opportunity to escape. But before he could make up his mind, Deborah had let out such a scream, directly evoking his fear of List. He was once a candidate for the Dragon Knight that everyone revered, but the years had long since ground away his edges and corners. List's powerful attack had evoked the fear of being dominated by the true Dragon Knight in the past. He had fallen in fear of the Dragon Knight. For a Dragon Knight candidate to actually fear the Dragon Knight, it was obvious that he had been eliminated by the Kingdom's Dragon Knight program. He had never recovered from this setback. Why? It's understandable that I, Yevich, fear the Dragon Knight, but why am I so afraid of List? Why does he give me the same feeling of fear as His Highness Alex White Iron, the Dragon Knight? Looking at List straight back, a thought suddenly emerged that he couldn't suppress no matter what. Could it be that he is also a Dragon Knight? No, that's impossible. How could a fly from Sapphire become a Dragon Knight? Apart from the Sapphire Dragon that was almost killed by His Highness Alex White Iron, it is impossible for a second dragon to appear in Sapphire. It is just a barren island. Every year, the starving sapphire flies have to come to the rich continent to plunder supplies in order to survive. The impression that the people of the continent's kingdoms had of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had always been barren, poor, barbaric, and rude. Otherwise, they would not come to the continent every year to plunder. Moreover, many nobles knew that the Sapphire family had once wanted to establish a country on the continent, but the Eagle Kingdom had launched a dragon-slaying war against them. They had only dispatched a white iron dragon which had almost killed the sapphire dragon. The sapphire dragon had shed its blood on the continent, leaving behind the blue blood mountain full of sapphire mines. Only then did it flee overseas in a panic and establish a country on a barren island. So far, the blue blood mountain could still occasionally be mined for sapphire mines. Impossible. Yevich shook his head. He had convinced himself to believe that List was not a dragon knight, but that he had obtained some kind of power that surpassed that of a sky knight. There was a huge gap between a sky knight and a dragon knight, but it was not that there were no excessively strong people between them. At least, Yevich knew of a Marquis, the lord he once followed, Marquis of the Boulder, Pylov the Great Berserker, who was such an excessively strong person. Even with his strength when he had just become a sword saint, he was unexpectedly unable to take a punch from the other party. Moreover, he also knew that the direct bloodline of the Great Berserker family did not call themselves knight, but rather bearskin wearers. It was said that there were many families similar to the bearskin wearers. He had heard the names wolf wearers and pigskin wearers from the drunken Pylov, but he did not know which two families he was referring to. In addition, Yevich had also heard of the vampire families. Among the vampires who liked to attach themselves to the great nobles, the most powerful pureblood vampires had strength that surpassed that of a sky knight. List is so young, what is his identity? What kind of power did he obtain? There was not much time for him to ponder blindly. After dragging Deborah up, List had already walked towards Yevich. On the other side, under the personal intervention of the Count, as well as witnessing the defeat of their two sky knights, the knights of Little River Hardcastle could no longer hold on and fled in all directions. Those who could not escape knelt on one knee and accepted their fate as captives. The night charge battle, which was supposed to be a head-on confrontation, thus came to a dramatic end. Detaining the already bound Deborah and Yevich, Coral Island's orders of chivalry smoothly entered Little River Hardcastle. Chapter 6:14. Sitting on the seat of honor in the meeting hall of Little River Hardcastle, Lee William was in a good mood. He had easily earned a castle. His side had only suffered a few dozen casualties, but he had captured two Sky Knight and a large number of Earth Knight. Coupled with the knight he had previously incorporated in Snow Pear Castle, the more he fought, the more knight he had. Although according to the plan, the resources belonged to List, the military exploits belonged to Lee William. At the same time, the surrendered knight could be chosen by all the aristocratic lords of Coral Island. As long as they could afford the consumption of knight, there was no shortage of knight captives. Even elite Earth Knights had been captured in large numbers. There were many who could not afford to pay the ransom, so they were free to choose. Lee William was in a good mood. List was also in a good mood. He had captured two Sky Knight in a row, one Count and one Viscount. This ransom was not something that could be compensated by ordinary wealth. He asked the Count with a beaming face, "Father, you have also captured a Sky Knight before. What price did he pay to redeem himself?" The Coral Island Knight basically understood this matter, and List naturally also understood it. He only asked to vent his excitement. The Count's eyes shone. "In that battle, I got two lesser sprites as ransom. A Sky Knight is worth two lesser sprites, so Yevich wants two. However, Deborah is, after all, the nephew of Marquis Wildwave. His territory is very rich, so he should pay a bit more for lesser sprites." List decided on the standard of the ransom in a flash. Yevich was poor and paid less, while Deborah was rich and paid more. It was fair and just. List also conveyed his request in this way. He first met Yevich, the former Dragon Knight candidate. He seemed to have been hit a bit hard, his eyes absent-mindedly staring at the ceiling. "Yevich!" List shouted across the cage. Yevich blankly turned his head. When he saw List, he was immediately shocked and slightly recovered. "It's you! You look younger than before. Don't talk nonsense. You should know why I'm here. How much ransom do you need to set me free? I don't like to bargain with others, so the standard is the bottom line. I don't accept bargaining." List said faintly, "Two fairies. They cannot be older than 50 years old, and they must be made of grains, magic potions, or fairies of equal value." In addition, you need to compensate me with a group of craftsmen. 2 little elves? It has to be a grain or potion-type sprite. Yevich smiled miserably. Viscount List, you are also a Viscount. How many little elves do you think a Viscount can have? An ordinary Viscount might only have 1 lesser elf, but you're a candidate for a Dragon Knight and a Sword Saint. Don't tell me you can't even bear to part with 2 lesser elves. You should know that your status as a Sword Saint is worth at least 3 lesser elves, but because you are only a Viscount, I lowered the standard to 2. Ha ha! Yevich's laughter became more and more miserable, and he even wanted to cry. I used to be a candidate for a Dragon Knight, but I was just a commoner, and I used the Lord's resources for my training. Later on, it was the kingdom that provided resources, and I didn't have any resources or income. After 10 or 20 years of idleness, I stopped at the level of a Sword Saint. What do you think I have? List frowned. So you mean you can't take out 2 lesser elves as ransom? I do have 2 lesser elves, but they are born of water flowers. Water peanuts are just common water plants, and they can only be used as fodder for livestock and have no other output. A dignified Sword Saint had been reduced to such a state. It was also an eye-opener for List. Are you kidding me? It's true. If you think it's feasible, I'm willing to exchange 2 water peanut lesser elves for my freedom. As for craftsmen, you can take away any craftsman in Ice Pear City. In fact, I probably can't follow Marquis Wildtow anymore. My reputation has been completely ruined. Yevich had followed 4 lords in succession. The first 3 had fallen out with him, and when he followed this one, he was captured. It was likely that no lord would be willing to take him in. List felt a toothache. He thought that he could make a lot of money by capturing Yevich, but he didn't expect to run into a pauper. 2 lesser elves that could only produce weeds were certainly valuable, but they simply couldn't be compared to grain or potion lesser elves. He was unwilling to use these 2 lesser elves as ransom, as he would suffer too much of a loss. But apart from them, Yevich really didn't have any other lesser elves. This kind of thing could be figured out with a little investigation. He thought about it. He asked, apart from the 2 lesser elves, how many sprite worms do you have? And what kind of sprite worms do you have? I have 14 sprite worms, one of which can be used to plant potions, and one of which can be used to plant grains. But after using them as ransom, I won't have any resources or income, so I might as well surrender and pledge allegiance to you. Speaking up to this point, Yevich's eyes suddenly lit up. He grasped a trace of inspiration and stared blankly at List outside the cage. He immediately gasped for breath and said excitedly, Viscount List, no, Sir List, your strength is so powerful that it makes people tremble, and I can't afford to pay my own ransom. Perhaps I can pledge allegiance to you. I can't stay in the Eagle Kingdom, so I might as well follow you and join Sapphire. Huh? List was shocked by Yevich's whimsical idea, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. A dignified sacred swordsman was willing to pledge allegiance because he couldn't afford the ransom. This was definitely big news that would make people's eyes pop out. It was too high profile. Moreover, he didn't trust Yevich's character, so after thinking about it, he simply refused. I don't need your loyalty. You pay the ransom directly. I can't afford the ransom, but I am willing to follow, sir. I can reduce the price. Just hand over all your sprites. Hand over all the sprites, and my life's efforts will be in vain. Sir, please allow me to follow you. Yevich directly knelt on one knee in the cage, and his tone became more and more fanatical. He had seen List's strength, and he had also seen List's youth. Such a lord had a limitless future. His reputation in the Eagle Kingdom was completely ruined, so he simply started anew and directly pledged allegiance to List, starting from the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. He didn't know how to govern a territory, but he was very competent at plundering. Pay the ransom. I am willing to follow, sir. The 2 were in a deadlock. List was very reluctant to accept Yevich, who had such a bad character, but Yevich was determined to follow List. They went back and forth a few times. List's face sank, and he said through clenched teeth, 2 lesser sprites as ransom. I don't want the sprite worm. Yevich, this is my bottom line. Chapter 6:15. Although it was delightful to have a powerful follower, List valued the follower's character more. Yevich had fallen out with the Lord several times, and now he was willing to join the invaders for a little ransom. His character was very bad. On Earth, he was like Lu Bu, who was the world's #1 general in that era. Yevich was not very powerful among the Sword Saints, and there was a huge gap between their strength in their respective eras. However, Yevich did not kill his father for glory. At most, he fell out with the Lord. It was not uncommon for lords and followers to fall out because of private conflicts. If it was only because of his character, it was not a big deal to accept his follower. No matter how despicable a person was, he had to obediently accept his assignment. Otherwise, List's Skycutter Greatsword would not be merciful. Whether it was a dragon or a snake, it had to coil up in his territory. What he was worried about was the problem of resources. Once Yevich followed him, before the enfeoffment, Yevich's potions would definitely depend on List. Even if he gave all the elves to List, the production would not be enough to satisfy the Sword Saint's potions. As a candidate for the Dragon Knight, Yevich was only at the level of a Sword Saint after so many years. It could be seen that he had never really enjoyed the pleasure of using potions. Although I can already afford the potions for me and little fire dragon Leo, the territory's resources will be stretched to support a Sword Saint. It's not appropriate. This was one of his concerns. The second reason was that he was too high profile. He had defeated a Sword Saint, which was already so high profile that he could be noticed by Sapphire Grand Duke at any time, which would arouse his suspicion. Taking another Sword Saint as his follower was because he was afraid that the Grand Duke would not know, so he took the initiative to remind him that there must be something wrong. But why do I feel a vague sense of excitement and want to provoke him? Is it because I guessed that the Grand Duke is not a Dragon Knight but only a Lord of the Dragon Domain, so I don't care? He looked at Yevich Waterpeanut, who was kneeling on the ground, but his thoughts drifted far away. This time, the Grand Duke did not take action. As long as the Dragon Knight of the Eagle Kingdom was restrained by the Dragon Knight of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, there was no need for the Sapphire Dragon to appear. As an existence that could stabilize the fate of each country, dragons would not easily appear unless it was a critical moment. Even if they were merely injured, it would waste a lot of resources. For example, during the dragon-slaying war, the Sapphire Dragon's blood spilled in the sky, leaving behind a blue blood mountain, which allowed the Eagle Kingdom to mine the Sapphire Mine for hundreds of years. To any country, these losses would be unbearable and disastrous. Last year, the reason why the Grand Duke was dispatched was probably to show that the Sapphire Dragon was safe and sound. Therefore, there was no need for him to move out this year. It was more important for him to stay in the country to protect it. The one riding on the dragon's back is the Dragon Knight, and the one standing on the dragon's back is the Lord of the Dragon Domain. Perhaps the Grand Duke is really just the Lord of the Dragon Domain. Right, I can ask Yevich. He was once a candidate for the Dragon Knight and participated in the Dragon Knight project. He should know the secret of that flat spot on the dragon's back. Hence, he asked, I have a few questions that I need you to answer for me. Sir, please feel free to ask. Yevich had already put himself in the role of a follower. You were once a candidate for the Dragon Knight, and you were promoted to a Sky Knight at the age of 16. Have you been in contact with real dragons since then? I've been in contact for a while, or rather, I've been in contact with 3 dragons for a period of time, namely the White Iron Dragon, the Brass Dragon, and the Light Emerald Dragon. How many dragons are there in the Eagle Kingdom? There are 9 dragons raised by the kingdom, 6 dragons have been discovered in dangerous places, and 5 dragons are raised by the 5 vassal countries, for a total of 20 dragons. What about the Dragon Knight? There are 6 Dragon Knight in the kingdom, and 2 Dragon Knight in the vassal countries. What's the difference between the Dragon Knight and the Lord of the Dragon Domain? List gradually asked the question he really wanted to ask. The number of dragons and the number of Dragon Knight was just common sense. Yevich frowned. I don't know much about the Lord of the Dragon Domain, and I only know a little about the Dragon Knight, so sir, I can't say what's the difference between them. So, does the Dragon Knight have to make a contract with the dragon? It's not a contract, but a fusion. The deep fusion between the Dragon Knight and the dragon can exert unimaginable power. How do they fuse? To get the approval of the dragon. Yevich's tone was a little low. Dragons are smart and arrogant, powerful creatures. Their wisdom is no different from that of an adult. The kingdom spends a lot of resources to support these dragons, and the dragons return with minerals and help in battle. But only the approved knight can ride on their back. Is there a difference between standing on their back and riding on their back? Yes. Yevich gave an affirmative answer. There is a place on the back of the dragon called the Dragon Tooth Platform, which is directly connected to the dragon's teeth. The dragon's soul lives in the teeth, so when the knight rides on the Dragon Tooth Platform, he can have a deep communication with the dragon's soul and complete the fusion. Hearing this, List suddenly understood. The Sapphire Grand Duke indeed didn't succeed in riding the dragon. He was standing, not sitting on the Dragon Tooth Platform. It could be judged that the Grand Duke had reached an agreement with the Sapphire Dragon to become a lord of the dragon domain and similarly obtain the dragon's power. But obviously, it didn't count as getting the approval of the dragon, so he couldn't fuse with it. A lord of the dragon domain might have an extended lifespan, but its strength was certainly far inferior to the Dragon Knight. List understood this and only felt a lot more relaxed. Given time, it was only a matter of time before he surpassed the Sapphire Grand Duke. When he stood in front of the Grand Duke as a Dragon Knight, perhaps at that time, the Sapphire family would understand who the real master of the sea was. He took a deep breath, restrained his fluctuating emotions, and continued to ask, "Do you know how to get the approval of a dragon and then fuse with it?" "My apologies, sir. I'm just a sacred swordsman. My meager strength simply isn't enough for the dragon to take a fancy to me, let alone approve of me. After that, I abandoned myself for a period of time and was expelled from the Dragon Knight program, never to see a dragon again. However, I was once taught by the Dragon Knight, His Highness Alex White Iron." "The Dragon Knight of the royal family?" "Yes." The royal family of the Eagle Kingdom had two surnames. One was Moonlight Silver, derived from a silver dragon, and the other was White Iron, derived from a white iron dragon. The Moonlight Silver branch had been kings for generations, but it had rarely produced a Dragon Knight. However, the White Iron branch could produce a Dragon Knight every generation. Alex White Iron was this generation's Dragon Knight, a prince of the same rank as the Grand Duke. He was nearly 40 years old and had an illustrious reputation. Even in the distant Grand Duchy of Sapphire, List had heard of his deeds, because he also had a heroic title, Dragon Slayer, who had killed an evil dragon that was said to be an ice dragon. He narrowed his eyes. List suddenly asked, "Yevich, compared to the Dragon Knight Alex White Iron, how do you think my strength is in front of him?" "This? Just say it. I hope you can comprehensively measure the gap between me and the Dragon Knight." "Sir, I actually don't know. I haven't seen His Highness Alex in action. And I can't even withstand one move from Sir, so I can't compare at all. But in front of His Highness Alex, I feel uncomfortable even breathing. In this aspect, he is stronger than Sir." "Is that dragon's might?" "It should be." For the time being, List was only training with the little fire dragon Leo and hadn't been recognized as a Dragon Knight. So he didn't possess dragon's might. List had experienced the dragon's might of a real Dragon Knight or Lord of the Dragon Domain in front of the Sapphire Grand Duke, and he indeed felt that it was difficult to breathe. The invisible dragon had also brought him dragon's might, which also gave people the illusion of suffocation. Even the newborn Leo had a weak dragon's might. Although dragon's might didn't have any direct attacking power, it could definitely interfere with the opponent's movements. Coupled with the cooperation of the dragon, it wasn't hard to imagine how strong the Dragon Knight was. Sighing slightly, List couldn't help but lament. "It seems that the gap between me and the Dragon Knight is still very far." Yevich immediately said excitedly, "The Dragon Knight is the pinnacle of the world's strength. It's rare to see one, and it's difficult to mobilize it at will. But Sir's strength is second only to the Dragon Knight, and you are a powerful figure who can influence a battle. I've only experienced your strength on the Marquis of the Boulder." Chapter 6:16. Who is the Marquis of the Boulder? He is the second lord I followed, pile of earthly berserker, an old Marquis family in the Eagle Kingdom. The heirs of this family all claim to be bearskin wearers. They do not like to charge on horseback, but prefer to fight on foot. Sometimes fists are more powerful than swords. Bearskin wearers, what profession is this? List had encountered many cultivation systems that were different from those of knights and mages as he continued to expand his horizons. I don't know. In addition to bearskin wearers, there should be wolf wearers and pig wearers. When I first became a sword saint, I challenged the Marquis of the Boulder. After he ate a poisonous mushroom, his momentum soared and he sent me flying with just one punch. Poisonous mushroom? A poisonous mushroom, very common, small gray umbrella-shaped mushroom called dog urine moss. List knew that even on Coral Island and Black Horse Island, these small poisonous mushrooms would grow after rain. He did not expect that this poisonous mushroom could be like a stimulant, making bearskin wearers excited and their strength soar. However, bearskin wearers felt a bit like the druid bear warriors. In the sun scripture that Achi studied, there was a detailed explanation. Using natural magic and observation of animals, the warriors among the children of the sun could turn into bears, eagles, leopards, and so on to fight. Perhaps bearskin wearers and druid bear warriors really had something to do with each other. So he asked, "So, what changes did bearskin wearers have after eating dog urine moss?" I felt bigger, my eyes were a little red, and my spirit seemed to have fallen into a high level of excitement. The Marquis of the Boulder was usually gentle, making people feel that he was born to be a noble. However, after eating dog urine moss, he became a violent humanoid world of Warcraft. Yevich tried his best to recall, but he had seen the Marquis of the Boulder fight less, so he did not know much about bearskin wearers' fighting style. After all, it was a family secret training inheritance, and it was difficult to open its mysteries to outsiders. Does bearskin wearers have the same fighting spirit secret book as Knight? I don't know. Do they practice magic or fighting spirit? It should be Do Chi, fighting aura. Although Yevich didn't say it in detail, List still managed to form a preliminary impression of the bearskin man through his description. He didn't turn into a bear, but there were signs of going berserk. He didn't like to fight on a mount, so he couldn't be called a knight. He could be called a warrior. As for warriors who could go berserk, List couldn't help but think of a legendary combat profession on Earth, the berserker. Of course, the bearskins were similar to berserkers. As a matter of fact, as a world with a different language and history from Earth, there was no such thing as dragon, elf, sorcerer, or knight in this world. List translated these things in his mind based on his personal preferences and the legends on Earth so that he could understand them better. Just like the name Druid, it was just a string of twisted characters in the Serpentine language. There was no reference meaning. It did not have the connotation of the evolution of words in Chinese, nor did it have the change of the root of the word in English. The reason why it was named Druid was because of List's impression. The legends on Earth mentioned druids who could turn into bears, eagles, and other animals. Thus, this string of symbols with no specific meaning was understood by him as a druid. Liches, vampires, they were all understood in a similar way. Another example was the elves. In the legends on Earth, they should be the highly intelligent race that lived in the forest described in The Lord of the Rings. However, according to List's understanding of this world, the elves did not exist. Thus, according to the literal meaning of the elves, they were magical creatures that could grow plants. Yevich, you felt the strength of the Marquis of the Boulder. Compared to me, who is stronger? I feel that you are stronger, my lord. When I first became a sword saint, I was sent flying by a punch from the Marquis of the Boulder, but I didn't suffer too much damage. Now that I've been a sword saint for many years, I'm much stronger than when I first became a sword saint. However, I was heavily injured by my lord's arrow and defeated by a sword. My defeat was even more straightforward. List nodded and didn't say anything, but he understood something in his heart. As expected, the Dragon Knight is the most powerful profession. The bearskins are at most a relatively strong inheritance, but they don't have the strength to compete with the Dragon Knight. In short, the Marquis of the Boulder represented a new profession system, the bearskins. This meant that in this world, spellcasters were not the only professions that practiced qi, and the knight was not the only profession that practiced qi. For example, those who wore bearskin, those who wore wolf skin, and those who wore boar skin, all of them had the possibility of cultivating an extremely powerful system. There were even more hidden professions on the main road. In the ordinary practice stage, the knight might not necessarily have the upper hand. After all, even a perfect sky knight might not be able to resist the powerful bearskins. However, with the bug-like practice of dragon riding and the power of dragons, the knight would naturally rule the world. With the rise of the Dragon Knight, not only did the other qi professions gradually decline, but the rulers of the Moon Empire, the spellcasters, also gradually declined. The times were advancing, and civilization was developing. Everything that could not adapt to survival would be eliminated, like the ancient spellcasters and warriors. Even if they survived, they could only tremble in fear under the domination of the Dragon Knight. Liszt was very glad. He was also the ruler of this era, not the one being dominated. Soon, he restrained his excitement and pride. The bearskin's information broadened his horizons, but the most important thing right now was Yevich's ransom. He still didn't want to accept Yevich. Yevich, including the Marquis of the Wild Wave, you have followed 4 lords. How did you fall out with the first 3? Yevich took a deep breath and sighed. When I became a candidate for the Dragon Knight, my first lord promised to marry his daughter to me, but I was soon eliminated by the Dragon Knight plan. The lord quickly reneged and married his daughter to the son of a great noble. In a fit of anger, Yevich refused to follow. The second lord was the Marquis of the Boulder. He was strong and gentle, but he valued loyalty more. He thought that Yevich was not loyal enough, so he was very harsh on Yevich in terms of military achievements and material distribution. Yevich simply handed over the fief and left. The third lord valued Yevich very much, but when he found a wild elf in the territory that had just been assigned to Yevich, he forcibly took the elf away. Yevich was poor and scared. Seeing the elf that belonged to him was taken away, he directly turned hostile. So he wandered for a while and followed the current Marquis of the Wild Wave. After several military exploits, he was conferred the title of Viscount, and his relationship with Yevich was quite normal. However, he was defeated and captured, and he even lost Deborah, the nephew of Marquis Wildtau. This disgraceful experience would completely erode Yevich's reputation, which was already almost gone. So he decided to leave the Eagle Kingdom and follow Liszt. I don't owe anything to the Eagle Kingdom. Except for the Marquis of the Wild Wave, I don't think I owe anything to any other lord. Now that I was defeated and captured, I was loyal to the Marquis of the Wild Wave. Now, I choose to follow in the footsteps of my lord, to fight for him and to start over. In this way, Yevich's character was at least much better than Lu Bu's. Chapter 6:17. Of course, given that you answered my questions very seriously and revealed a lot of valuable information to me, I won't ask for too much. We can sit down and talk about everything. Liszt was quite satisfied with Yevich's attitude. In addition to the information about the Dragon Knight, the one in bearskin, and so on, Yevich also explained in detail the situation of the Marquis of Wildwave and the information about attacking the territory around the river source, which was very valuable to Liszt. So he didn't intend to squeeze too much, just the 2 lesser elves and the craftsman. Then he ignored Yevich's disappointment. He turned around and left the cage, ready to see Deborah Rainflower Stone. Compared with Yevich, the poor man, Deborah was definitely rich. The cages were separated to prevent the 2 from colluding or escaping. While walking, he called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: Iron Knight Alvin Eagle Sword. Huh? Alvin Eagle Sword. This surname is a bit special. It's actually named after a sword, and isn't Eagle Sword the name of most of the standard magic swords of the Eagle Kingdom? Liszt was no stranger to this. He had collected a lot of equipment from the Eagle Kingdom's orders of chivalry, and the Eagle Sword had cut a lot of them. The Eagle Sword was a magic weapon. Although the quality was not outstanding, the materials were popular and the craftsmanship was exquisite, so the popularity rate was very high. Many elite Earth Knights liked to wear the Eagle Sword. Compared with the standard magic swords made by the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, the eagle sword was slightly shorter, but the blade was wider and required more strength to hold. Of course, there was no fixed standard for the quality of a knight's sword. The Grand Duchy of Sapphire's orders of chivalry focused on coming and going like the wind and rarely fought head-on. So the knight's sword was longer and narrower, making it easier to stab and move. The eagle sword was powerful and heavy, more suitable for breaking through enemy lines and guarding castles. This Iron Knight is named after the eagle sword. He is definitely not an ordinary person. Of course, it seems that only big families can train Iron Knights. He only thought about it for a moment before focusing on the next mission. Receiving the news of the fall of Little River Heart Castle and the capture of Deborah Rainflower Stone. Marquis Newtow is unable to restrain his anger. He has already led elite orders of chivalry to reinforce Little River Heart Castle from 100 miles away. This is destined to be a test of life and death. Please repel Marquis Newtow's elite orders of chivalry. Reward: an unknown number of wisps. An unknown number of fairies. List was pleasantly surprised at first, but then he frowned. This seems to be the ransom for Deborah's Rainflower Stone. At first, he felt that there was a newborn sprite waiting to be discovered by him, but after thinking about it carefully, he realized that the most likely opportunity to obtain a sprite was clearly Deborah's ransom. According to the nature of smoke missions, rewards would never appear out of thin air. Instead, they would be guided by the situation and guide the way. Right now, the most suitable direction was undoubtedly Deborah's ransom. Marquis Newtow would not hold back from taking action just because the hostage was in List's hands. After all, this was his nephew, not his son. He would definitely choose to defeat the Coral Island orders of chivalry first, and then consider the issue of Deborah's ransom. List had already invaded his territory, so there was no reason for him to retreat. At least according to the rules of War of the Night, the moment a knight was captured, he had already left the war. He only had to wait for the ransom to be paid. If he could defeat the Coral Island orders of chivalry, he might not even need to pay the ransom. If he caught List, then List would have to worry about how to prepare his own ransom. Marquis Newtow is a veteran Sky Knight at the peak of the Sky Knight realm. When he was young, he was known as the Raging Wave Sword Sage. His elite orders of chivalry are known as the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, named after the Roaring River. They should be very powerful. List pondered with rapt attention. The Coral Island orders of chivalry obviously could not contend against the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. They were not on the same level. The elite orders of chivalry directly under the Marquis were filled with elite Earth Knights. If I command the Blizzard Beast Squad to participate in the charge, I don't know if I can help the Coral Island orders of chivalry and contend against the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. If not, then I will have to do it myself. With my strength, I should be able to fight the elite orders of chivalry alone. List was also a half-step dragon knight, so he was confident. He did not immediately go to see Deborah, but pondered for a moment. Combining the information revealed by Yevich with the arrangement of the smoke mission, a bold idea quickly emerged. Little River Heart Castle, Great River Heart Castle, Roaring City, Three Dragons City. Yevich said that there is a secret iron mine hidden in trapped Dragon Mountain. List held back his thoughts. He summoned Bloody Mary and the other 4 vampires. How is the preparation of the blood magic book going? Sir, we vampires advocate violence. Writing books, which is something only mages can do, has not been done for many years, so it will take some time. No hurry. Now I will give you a new mission. According to the information I received, there is a trapped Dragon Mountain west of Three Dragon City, and there is a secret iron mine in trapped Dragon Mountain. You will investigate trapped Dragon Mountain for me, find this secret iron mine, and ascertain the strength of its guards. Yes, sir. The 5 vampires adapted well to the identity of blood servants. Ever since they saw List display his invincible might, they no longer had any malicious thoughts. When the blood servants left, List hurriedly went to find the Count to discuss how to resist the attack of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry led by Marquis Newtow. At the same time, he communicated his bold idea to the Count. Father, according to my speculation about Marquis Nuteo, he has already led the roaring orders of chivalry to meet our Coral Island orders of chivalry. I also guess so when the materials are packed and transported away, we will leave Little River Heart Castle and sweep other cities and castles. Changing places after firing a shot was the essence of the pioneering order. Lee William was very proficient in this due to his many years of experience. They could not fight head-on if they were outnumbered. However, List shook his head and said, I don't want to leave Little River Heart Castle. We should rely on the walls of Little River Heart Castle and strike preemptively. Strike preemptively? Yes, we have binoculars and can observe the movements of the roaring orders of chivalry in advance. Why not ambush 2 orders of chivalry from the flank? Father will lead the charge in the middle, and I will command the Blizzard Beast Squad to assist. When the orders of chivalry collide with each other, I will suppress them. The Count was a little hesitant. You are too bold, we should not fight Marquis Nuteo head-on. If we plunder a little supplies like the pioneering order every year, of course we don't need to meet Marquis Nuteo. But if we want to expand our military exploits, the fastest way is to plunder mines. He took out the map seized from Little River Heart Castle and pointed to the roaring river. He carefully sketched out a blueprint for war. Chapter 618. The source of the roaring river was unknown. It was probably a dangerous place tens of thousands of kilometers away. The continent was so vast that humans had yet to set foot in it. Some mountains, rivers, primeval forests, deserts, and lakes were all forbidden areas for living in World of Warcraft. The Earl looked at where List was pointing. Snowpear Castle was at the mouth of the roaring river, Little River Heart Castle was upstream of Snowpear Castle, and further upstream was Great River Heart Castle. However, List's finger went beyond Great River Heart Castle and continued to extend upstream. Finally, it stopped at Three Dragons City, which was further upstream. Three Dragons City is the fief of an earl, who is a follower of Marquis Wildwave. After defeating Marquis Wildwave and uprooting Three Dragons City, the roaring river will become the inland river of the Tulip Fleet. This golden waterway can not only transport resources quickly, but also transfer orders of chivalry. You want to use the roaring river to loot resources from the surrounding territories? Not just resources. List smiled and pointed to the west of Three Dragons City. Father, the name Three Dragons City comes from a battle in the past. It is said that 2 Dragon Knight passed by this place while chasing an evil dragon. That's why it is called Three Dragons City. The Earl did not speak but listened carefully. List repeated the information revealed by Yevich. Three Dragons City is also the intersection of the Roaring River and the Three Dragons River. Further upstream of the Three Dragons River, there is a chain of mountains called the Hungry Dragon Mountain. Father, look, there is a secret iron mine here. Iron mine? Yes, this information was revealed by Yevich. He once entered the Hungry Dragon Mountain to capture a World of Warcraft as a mount. I have already sent a blood servant to investigate. Once it is confirmed that there is an iron mine, maybe we can cooperate with Uncle's orders of chivalry and rely on the Three Dragons River and the Roaring River to do what you did when you were young. List finished and waited for the Earl's reply with bright eyes. The Earl did not answer immediately. He was immersed in the memories of his youth. When he inherited Gregtile's status as the Viscount of Tahiti City, he was determined to revitalize his family. Every year, he would be ordered to plunder resources and plunder military achievements. One year, he even penetrated deep into the hinterland of the Eagle Kingdom, seized an iron mine, and plundered at least 200,000 tons of iron ore. Because of these 200,000 tons of iron ore, even the Dragon Knight of the Eagle Kingdom was drawn out to intercept the fleet from far away. Because of this magnificent feat that shook Sapphire City, Lee William was fancied by Marquis Merlin, who betrothed his daughter Melissa to him. The following year, the Grand Duke personally conferred upon him the title of Earl of Coral Island. However, nearly 20 years had passed, and the feats of his youth had never been reproduced. He had also wasted more than 20 years in the position of Count. He still had great ambitions and hoped to become a Marquis. The iron mines of Coiling Dragon Mountain were a shortcut to the Marquis realm. His breathing became a bit hurried. However, after thinking about it, he shook his head. List, I understand that you are now high-spirited and have great ambitions for your strength, but it is too dangerous. Father, take advantage of the Dragon Knight's reaction and finish it quickly. There is a great chance of success in one battle. If we don't take the iron mines of Coiling Dragon Mountain this time, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to do so next time. Mine mining is decreasing year by year. Since you know that I plundered mines when I was young, then you should also know that the consequence of that time was to draw out the Dragon Knight. The Earl still had lingering fears. If it wasn't for the Dragon Knight of the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, I might have been intercepted and killed by the Dragon Knight on the sea. List was silent for a moment, his eyes still shining. Wealth comes from danger. The Dragon Knight, the pinnacle of power. Dragons were not rare in this world. It was just that compared to the vast land, the distribution of dragons was very sparse. Many nobles would not even see a dragon once in their lifetime, let alone ordinary people. The Eagle Kingdom, including its vassal states and the evil dragon, had a total of 20 dragons, which was not a lot. Only the Dragon Knight could be conferred the title of Grand Duke and create a new country. Until the dragon died or flew away, the country would come to an end. Therefore, as long as it was a country, whether it was a duchy or a kingdom, there must be dragons. The kingdom itself had a lot of vassal states, so naturally, there would not be too few dragons in its own country. The Eagle Kingdom raised 9-headed dragons, but at present only 6 of them had merged with humans. That was to say, there were 6 Dragon Knight. These Dragon Knight were either born into the royal family or contracted to serve the kingdom for life. However, compared to the kingdom, which was almost as large as Asia, 6 Dragon Knight could not guard such a vast land. It would take 10 days to half a month to deliver the news from the south to the north. What's more, the Eagle Kingdom had a Dragon Knight, and the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom also had a Dragon Knight. The Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom had more Dragon Knight than the Eagle Kingdom. It was just that every Dragon Knight was involved in a lot of international relations, so it was difficult to dispatch them easily, especially in the dragon-slaying war between the Dragon Knight. It was naturally a good thing if they won, but if they lost, it would be a terrible result that would shake the foundation of the country. Why did the royal family give their own dragons to outsiders to ride on? It was because there were not enough Dragon Knight, and the country would be in great trouble. Just like China, Russia, and the United States all had nuclear weapons, but no one dared to casually throw them away, let alone reduce them at will. This was a means of deterrence and checks and balances. The Eagle Kingdom, the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, and even the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, these vassal states all had Dragon Knight or dragons. However, they were afraid of each other, opposed, and involved with each other, so there were few dragon-slaying wars between the Dragon Knight. The Dragon Knight also rarely participated in the wars of the Ordinary Knight. Using the Dragon Knight to deal with the Ordinary Knight, almost one Dragon Knight could destroy countless orders of chivalry. But if you could destroy the other side's orders of chivalry, the other side's Dragon Knight could also destroy your orders of chivalry. No one could take advantage of the fight, so it was better to focus on deterrence and participate in the war as a supplement. No matter how ambitious the Count was, after all, time waited for no man, and he already had fear in his heart. List was not willing to give up this good opportunity. The Dragon Knight of the Eagle Kingdom is involved at the border of the Eagle Kingdom. As long as we finish the battle quickly plunder the iron ore, and retreat along the Three Dragons River and the Roaring River, by the time the news reaches the Dragon Knight, we have already returned to the country. What if we can't retreat in time? List, I desire the title of Marquis, but I don't want to pay a painful price for it. Your future is bright, and the glory of the night will always look after you. There is no need to be so radical. Radical? Very radical. List himself understood that such a move was not so much bold as radical and rash. He was not like this before. He would rather stay in the flower town than participate in the war. He was willing to farm in a small place for half his life, armed to the teeth, and then pursue his dream. He did not expect that he would get a dragon in advance. Coupled with the power of the smoke dragon and the gift of the invisible dragon, His strength would advance by leaps and bounds, and he would soon stand at the top of the world. His mentality had unknowingly undergone a tremendous change. He became eager for war and eager for plunder. He did not change the world, but the world quietly changed him. Of course, he preferred to call his change growth. When he was just a commoner, what he calculated was naturally trivial. But now that he had one foot on the top of the mountain and saw the boundless land, how could he be willing to continue to stay on the island and scheme against one or two sprite worms? After a moment of deliberation, Liszt said slowly, "Father, you are right. I really do not need to be so radical. However, it is difficult for me to give up such a huge temptation. Perhaps we can compromise." The Count raised his eyebrows. Compromise how? If he could safely plunder the iron, or he would also be reluctant to give it up. Let's make it quick. But this time we will rope in the Taro family and the Golden Wheat family and have them help us seal off the territory around the Roaring River. Then we will share a portion of the plunder with them. After that, we will assemble the fleets of the three families and quickly evacuate to attack the river source. But there is still no guarantee of safety. After capturing Trapped Dragon Mountain, Father and I will immediately blend into the other orders of chivalry and lie low. Regardless of whether the fleets evacuate successfully or not, we will not participate in the follow-up. Additionally, we can notify the Grand Duke in advance and have him come to our aid. With the Grand Duke's protection, I believe that even if the Dragon Knight came in person, it would be of no use. The Count's eyes lit up. According to this method, they would indeed share a lot of merit points, but the risk would also be reduced to a minimum. It was already worth a try. The father and son looked at each other and saw determination in each other's eyes. Chapter 6:19. After formulating a plan, the rest of the work could be left to the Count. Liszt took the time to see Deborah Yuwashi. The river-slaying sword saint was living in a prison cell and did not suffer any grievances. "You are very strong." After seeing Liszt, he said his first sentence in a deep voice. "I can't even resist a casual blow from you. It seems that you have an extraordinary background. Do you know what ancient warrior inheritance you have?" Ancient warrior inheritance? Liszt had never heard of it, but he was smart enough not to reveal it. He just smiled. "Guess. You're wearing bear skin. That's not possible. You're not crazy. You're wearing wolf skin. That's not possible either. You're not bloodthirsty. You're wearing pig skin. That doesn't seem right either. You didn't turn into a meatball. Are you a gladiator? Or bronze-muscled warrior inheritance? Or shadow incarnation inheritance? The one who wore bearskin, wolfskin, pigskin, gladiator, bronze-muscled warrior, shadow incarnation." Deborah listed 6 ancient warrior inheritances in one breath, causing Liszt to gasp in admiration. If one did not come to the continent, one would not know the vastness of the world. In the Grand Duchy of Sapphire, he thought that there were only magicians and knight, but on the continent all kinds of strange cultivation systems emerged one after another. "Do you know a lot about ancient warrior inheritance?" Liszt asked calmly, as if he was chatting casually. Deborah snorted, his tone unconcealable pride. "As a member of a great aristocratic family that has lasted for hundreds of years, the Yuwashi family is naturally not unfamiliar with ancient warriors and ancient magicians. It is just surprising that there is an ancient warrior inheritance in a remote and desolate place like Sapphire. But you do not know which ancient warrior inheritance I inherited. There are so many inheritances submerged in the river of time. How could I know them all? But now is the era of knight rule. The ancient warrior inheritance will sooner or later be severed, and all of them will become chi secret skills that knight can cultivate. Ancient warrior inheritance, eventually turned into chi secret skills? Liszt again found an important piece of information. It turned out that the so-called chi secret skills were actually an inheritance of ancient warriors. It seemed that the knight cultivation system had absorbed the strong points of many families, including most of the ancient warrior inheritance. It made sense. He had practiced the magic eye and aura attenuation, which were very different from the mainstream chi manuals on the market. Not only was it more difficult to practice, but more importantly, compared to ordinary Do Chi secret techniques, Do Chi secret techniques tended to have special effects. In order to continue the routine, List still did not reveal any of his emotions. He said calmly, "Who knows what will happen in the future?" Although the Dragon Knight rules the world, how many Dragon Knights are there in the world? Without a dragon to fight alongside, no matter how strong a knight is, it will only be a Sky Knight who has reached perfection. A few Dragon Knights should be enough. Although he was already 34 years old, his shrewdness was as shallow as that of a 17 or 18-year-old youth. "I admit that you are an inheritor of an ancient warrior, and your strength is astonishing, but this is already the end of the ancient warrior's inheritance. There is no possibility of going any further." He did not know where his sense of superiority came from, but he said as if he felt sorry for List. Only a knight can figure out how to control the power of a dragon. Therefore, the knight rules the world. Not to mention ancient warriors, ancient mages, even mages will sooner or later integrate into the knight and become a part of the Iron Knight. You mainlanders know so much. I have never heard so much about the inheritance of ancient warriors and ancient mages in my country. Sapphire has only been established for a little more than 100 years, isolated on the sea. Every year, besides learning World of Warcraft and going out to plunder, what kind of civilization can there be? Indeed, living overseas has made me ignorant and ill-informed. List nodded seriously and then said, "But you have been captured by me. You are a sacred swordsman and a great noble, so I set a high ransom price for you. You need to take out 4 magic potions and grain sprites as the ransom." Deborah, who was feeling superior, almost choked on air. "What? My ransom requires 4 sprites, and they must be grain and potion sprites." "Yes." "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Deborah's face was as calm as water. "My uncle Marquis Wildtao will defeat you, and when the time comes, I won't need to pay a single ransom. I will defeat Marquis Wildtao and even capture him." "Naive. You have seen my strength. Do you think Marquis Wildtao can escape my attack? Even if he brings a few Sky Knight followers, I can still defeat him." List's face was arrogant and his tone was proud. "Although I am not a Dragon Knight, I am invincible under the Dragon Knight rank." "Naive, truly naive." Deborah laughed out of anger. "The Yuhua Stone family is not an ordinary noble. You have the inheritance of an ancient warrior, and your family also has the inheritance of Qi secret techniques. The roaring orders of chivalry will let you understand what it means to be unstoppable. The inheritance of an ancient warrior cannot stop the charge of a knight." This is not naive, this is self-confidence. As an inheritance of an ancient warrior, I can destroy the roaring orders of chivalry with just a little bit of effort. You think too highly of the inheritance of an ancient warrior. If you were really so powerful, you wouldn't be on the brink of decline like you are now. The inheritance of an ancient warrior and an ancient mage hasn't declined. There are still many inheritances in this world. They are just struggling at death's door, and there are only a few who can truly accomplish anything. List said with contempt, "You are just a count. You haven't even chosen a Dragon Knight candidate like Yevich. How many inheritance of an ancient warrior and an ancient mage could you possibly know? Yevich is just a Sky Knight born as a commoner, what can he know?" Deborah sneered. "Bearskins, wolfskins, pigskins, gladiators, bronze-muscled warriors, and shadow incarnations, I've more or less come into contact with them. Although I can't distinguish your inheritance, I'm certain that it is one of them." When leaving the prison cell, Deborah was still indignant. He hated List's arrogant, ignorant, and condescending character. Although he had lost to List, he believed that he had only lost to the inheritance of an ancient warrior. If he could obtain the inheritance of a Dragon Knight, killing List would only be a matter of minutes. In the end, it was just bad luck. The glory of a knight didn't favor him, but it didn't mean that he was inferior. But he didn't know. After leaving the prison cell, List sighed with emotion. "Yevich told me before that Deborah was a conceited and shallow fool. I didn't expect it to be true. I just casually played a few tricks and obtained a lot of inheritance knowledge about ancient warriors, ancient mages, and chi secret techniques. These days, nobles like to keep their secrets to themselves and wouldn't easily reveal the secrets that could strengthen others through cultivation. If List had asked directly, Deborah would definitely have kept his mouth shut. However, List took advantage of the opportunity to pretend to be an inheritance of an ancient warrior, and with a little provocation, Deborah spilled out many secrets that even Yevich didn't know. The inheritance of an ancient warrior hadn't been broken, but most of it had become chi secret techniques. As for the inheritance of an ancient mage, it seemed to have merged with the knight and become a part of the Iron Knight. It seems that I have to visit and provoke Deborah a few more times. Maybe this guy can even reveal his family's chi secret techniques to me, but I can be sure that Marquis Wildtao definitely grasps a chi secret technique. How should I obtain the chi secret technique of the Yuhua Stone family? Shaking his head, he didn't waste too much time thinking about it. Maybe he could capture Marquis Wildtao on the battlefield. At that time, wouldn't it be easy to obtain the chi secret technique? Chapter 620. Alvin Eaglesword did not need to be found. In fact, he was in Little River Heart Castle. He was imprisoned in the dungeon of the castle. My lord, this is the list of prisoners in Little River Heart Castle. Alvin Eaglesword is in this dungeon. Marcus took the dungeon list and found the dungeon where Alvin was imprisoned. The dungeon was dark, damp, and smelly. The prisoner inside was sleeping soundly on the wheat stalks. Marcus could not help but knock on the cell door with a stick and shouted, "Get up! Get up! Don't sleep! Alvin Eaglesword! Why is the food delivery so late today?" Alvin crawled up, muttering, and slowly came to the cell door. He was covered in rags, his hair was unkempt, his beard was unshaven, and he wore heavy metal locks on his hands and feet. It was obvious that he had been imprisoned in the dungeon for a long time. Looking at Marcus standing at the door, he could not help but stare blankly for a moment. Today, the person who will deliver the meal has changed, and it is also a night. Are you going to let me eat my last meal? Unable to stand still due to the stench of the dungeon, List had retreated to the entrance and heard the conversation inside. He said directly, "Marcus, let him out. Have someone clean him up, and then bring him to the living room to see me." "Yes, my lord." About a quarter of an hour later, List, who was sipping tea in the living room, saw Alvin Eaglesword, who had bathed, cut his hair, shaved, and changed into new clothes. He was a tall and thin middle-aged man, but judging from his skeleton, he should have been a strong man before he was imprisoned in the dungeon. But now his cheekbones were high, his eye sockets were deep, and the skin on his face and hands was pale as if he had never seen the light. He may not have been abused, but he definitely had not eaten his fill. "You are Alvin Eaglesword, an Iron Knight?" List looked at him with great interest. "Has Commander Marcus told you about the current situation?" Alvin seemed to be a little unaccustomed to the environment, and it took him a while to react. "You are a sapphire person, and you captured Little River Heart Castle? That hypocritical and greedy Deborah Rainflower Stone was also captured by you?" List frowned. "I'm the one asking you now. You just need to answer my question. I am Iron Knight Alvin Eaglesword. Tell me about your background and why you were captured in the Little River Heart Castle." Taking a deep breath, Arvin replied, "My ancestors used to be a marquis of the kingdom. They forged standard magic weapons such as the Eagle Sword for the kingdom and took the Eagle Sword as their surname. However, the family has declined. In my generation, not only have I lost my title, but many forging skills are also difficult to reproduce. In order to hone his skills, in order to revive the glory of his ancestors, Arvin went to several great nobles and studied weapon forging technology with their resources. However, his talent was limited, and he was unwilling to hand over the inheritance of his family. Therefore, the great nobles who invested in him considered him a swindler and expelled him. Later, he wandered around the area of the Roaring River. Deborah said that he would recommend me to Marquis Wildtao, but because the packaging of my family treasure was broken, revealing my true face. He gave birth to his greedy side, snatched my family treasure, and imprisoned me to hand over the family's forging skills. I refused to yield, so I lived in the dungeon. List was not too interested in his story. Instead, he asked with great interest, "What family treasure?" Arvin hesitated. List waited quietly. A moment later, Arvin seemed to have made up his mind. "I heard from Captain Marcus that Sir's strength is unfathomable, and you defeated Deborah in one move. I was able to see the light from the dungeon again because of Sir. As long as Sir helps me retrieve my family treasure, I will follow Sir and contribute all the Iron Knight skills of the Eaglesword family to Sir. I let you out naturally because I need you to follow me and serve me. But what is your family heirloom?" "It is a great elf weapon, the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword. It was originally a weapon made of dragon bones, and after generations of refinement by the family, it was finally cast into a great elf weapon. It has been offered to Marquis Wildtow by Deborah, and I don't expect to keep it. When Sir retrieves it, I just want to see it again." Arvin knew the power of the Marquis, and he could not afford a higher price, so he was not greedy and hoped that the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword would return to his hands. List was not excited about the great elf weapon. No matter how strong a weapon was, it depended on who was using it. For example, even if he held an ordinary weapon, he was still stronger than the Sky Knight who held a magic weapon. "Are you sure you can forge magic weapons?" "It is true that I did not inherit the family's talent. I can definitely forge ordinary magic weapons such as the Eaglesword, but I can't do anything higher than gemstone weapons. But I have the complete skills of my family, and I am willing to offer it to Sir, so that Sir can cultivate a more talented Iron Knight." "You are willing to take it out?" Arvin looked down at his thin and weak body, and his tone was full of resentment. "I was reluctant before, but now I have nothing to be reluctant about." "Okay, I agree to this deal." No matter what, Marquis Wildtow was an opponent he planned to eliminate. A powerful weapon like the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword should not be held in the hands of an ordinary Marquis. The Sapphire Grand Duke had a great elf weapon called the Wailing Cage Sword, which was the best weapon List knew. Now this Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword was just right for his identity. Arvin Eaglesword was only an elite Earth Knight. More than half a year in the dungeon had destroyed his body, and it would take a long time for him to recover. He asked someone to arrange this Iron Knight. List looked at the list of other prisoners in the dungeon and asked someone to interrogate them one by one to see if there were any special people among them. The result was disappointing. They were all Territorial Knight who had made mistakes. List had no intention of releasing these Territorial Knight who had made mistakes. After capturing Snow Pear Castle and Little River Heart Castle, the captured knight was enough for him to select hundreds of elite Earth Knight. Now he didn't even care about ordinary Earth Knight, let alone this group of prisoners. The Tulip Fleet was moving upstream along the Roaring River, heading for Little River Heart Castle. The castle's supplies had been packed and ready to be shipped to the river mouth. The knight who contacted the Taro family and the Golden Wheats family also received the order and left. The Earl wrote a letter to List's uncle, Messiro Longtaro, and the Marquis of Golden Island, Roderick Golden Wheats, dispatching orders of chivalry and ships to be ready to sail to the Roaring River. The first obstacle to the success of this plan was Marquis Nuteo's roaring orders of chivalry. Mastering the battle energy secret technique, being a Sky Knight at the level of perfection, and also wielding the great elf soldier, the Ice Soul Dragon Slaying Sword. I wonder how strong D. Maria Rainstone is. Standing in front of the window on the 4th floor of the castle, looking at the undulating crops in the distance, List was smug. I hope I can have a good fight and let me understand how strong I am. He felt that he had been very arrogant recently, doing things in such a high-profile manner that he did not care about the consequences. This was a very dangerous behavior, but he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. I can't control myself. So he hoped that a good fight would allow him to completely recognize reality and adjust his state of mind to face the possible suspicion of the Sapphire Grand Duke. Maybe I should make up an ancient warrior inheritance to deal with the Grand Duke now. Should I make up a bronze-muscled warrior or a gladiator or a person wearing wolf skin? as a historical inventor. Chapter 6:21. Bearskin, wolfskin, pigskin, gladiator, bronze-muscled warrior, and shadow incarnation. These were the 6 ancient warrior inheritances that List knew. However, he felt that he did not fit the ancient warrior inheritance. After all, he had very little information about the ancient warrior inheritance, and it was easy to make omissions. So, the original ancient warrior inheritance is the best explanation. He thought carefully for a moment and decided on his new identity. I will claim to have received the inheritance of the Ghost Swordsman. The Ghost Swordsman is an ancient cultivation system that can see the soul. The inheritance originated from the shipwreck salvaging on Black Horse Island. This is the blessing of the knight's glory. Ghostblade. This was the most suitable disguise for him before his identity as a dragon knight was confirmed. No matter whether others believe it or not, I believe it anyway. It's just a cover. If the Sapphire Grand Duke doesn't believe it and insists on forcibly investigating my true identity, then I can only give up the territory and flee overseas. Bring Ichi, bring the elves, bring Leo, and entrust all the territory to the Earl. The day he becomes a dragon knight is the moment when the flame of revenge engulfs the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. I hope that the power of fate of the smoke dragon will always envelop me. Pull the threads of fate for me. Turn misfortune into blessing, and be blessed by the glory of the night everywhere. List withdrew his gaze from the distant field. List did not want to have a conflict with the Sapphire Grand Duke. It was a very difficult choice to give up the Black Horse Island territory that he had worked hard to cultivate. The territory had inventions such as liquor, glass, tofu, and white paper. There were also a large number of rubber trees, corn grass, and other crops. In addition, the smoke grass could attract the invisible dragon to visit again at any time. Whether it was the smoke dragon or the invisible dragon, they were both sacred dragons, and he was reluctant to give up either one. If the Sapphire Grand Duke dared to snatch it, then it would depend on who was more capable and would be the winner laughing in the end. Of course, it's far from the point of worrying. Let's worry about when the Marquis Nuteo will appear. A day had passed. The scouting knight did not manage to find any traces of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. William Lee often soared into the sky and used his binoculars to observe the area, but he could not find the location of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry either. However, the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry had already set up an ambush in the forest on the shore of Little River Heart Castle. Once the Roaring Orders of Chivalry started to attack the stone bridge and collided with the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry's charge, the 2 ambushing Orders of Chivalry would rush out and launch surprise attacks from the left and right, destroying the Roaring Orders of Chivalry's formation. Of course, against the elite Orders of Chivalry, such a sneak attack could not achieve a decisive advantage. List will personally take action and command the Blizzard Beast Squad to give the Roaring Orders of Chivalry a surprise start and let them understand what it means to burst their chrysanthemums all over the mountain. In the blink of an eye, another night had passed. When the sun shone on the earth, William Lee, who soared into the sky with his binoculars, finally found the traces of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. The famous elite Orders of Chivalry, which attacked the river source, galloped from the west against the sun, like a black torrent rushing towards Little River Heart Castle. The black clothes, black armor, and black horse were faintly discernible in the dust that was stirred up. Boom! The Count quickly landed and then shouted, "Enemy attack! Blow the horn! Meet the enemy! Enemy attack! Woo 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 woo! Ready to charge!" Little River Heart Castle suddenly became restless, and the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry prepared their equipment and lined up, waiting for the coming battle. The Black Horse Islands Orders of Chivalry, under the leadership of Marcus, also quickly lined up. Marcus meticulously checked the attire of each knight. When he reached the end of the line, he saw a young face. "Emily, step out." "Yes, Commander." "Check the equipment." Marcus roared coldly. This young face belonged to List's youngest follower, Emily. She quickly checked her equipment. The armor was mithril armor, the set made by the grandson of the Bull Marquis. The knight's longsword was the red blood sword, the gemstone weapons that List had eliminated: horn bow, knight spear, horse armor, and arrows. "Commander, Emily has been checked. There are no omissions. Return to the line." Seeing that Emily had completed the equipment check, Marcus quietly breathed a sigh of relief. As the youngest Earth Knight, he certainly understood Emily's talent, and List also asked him to take care of Emily, so that after a few charges, Emily would not die before she grew up. It was impossible to not die in war, and Marcus was powerless to stop the chaos of the Orders of Chivalry's charge. He could only try to keep an eye on Emily's preparations. The subsequent fate had to be handed over to the glory of the night. In the team, Emily held her knight's spear, calm and unperturbed. Marcus was worried for her, but she was not worried at all. To her, the battlefield was the best place to train, and there was only excitement and no fear. Since the siege of Snow Pear Castle, she felt that her training speed had increased by leaps and bounds. Especially when she used the knight's spear to stab an Earth Knight to death. Her blood seemed to have started boiling, and her strength increased by leaps and bounds. When she used the red blood sword to kill another Earth Knight, her strength increased again. She did not understand why her training speed was so fast, but killing gave her a bone-deep excitement. It was not a bloodthirst. She did not crave for blood, and would not lose her mind because of killing. In fact, she only liked to train normally, and did not like to pay attention to the outside world. Woo 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 woo. The deep sound of the horn added to the atmosphere of the upcoming war. Emily's hand, which was holding the knight's spear, could not help but clench. "I can no longer see the powerful back of Sir. I must work harder to make my strength stronger, so that I can repay Sir for his infinite kindness to me." War. It came very quickly. The Roaring Orders of Chivalry led by Marquis Wild Tao did not pause at all, and directly charged towards Little River Heart Castle. It seemed that they were ready to take advantage of the fact that the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry was not ready to seize the opportunity to attack. However, with the binoculars, the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry had already lined up and were ready to go. List rode the Blizzard Beast Dosen, surrounded by a team of elite knight squads, and behind him were 8 Blizzard Beasts. Looking at the approaching torrent of knights, he did not move. When the Roaring Orders of Chivalry was about to rush in front of him, the knight guarding Little River Heart Castle also began to charge. At this time, List calculated the distance. He suddenly issued an order: "Blizzard Beast Squad, everyone, release rock grenades in front of the target." Woof! Dosen took the lead and opened his mouth, releasing magic originating from his bloodline. A huge rock formed in the air and slammed towards the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, followed by another 8 huge rocks formed and concentrated on the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the rock grenades was very strong. Even though the elite knight immediately released their fighting skills to meet the rock grenades, they were still smashed down. Broken stones splashed everywhere, causing great chaos to the Roaring Orders of Chivalry's vanguard cavalry formation. However, after all, they were elite Orders of Chivalry. They quickly adjusted their formation and continued to attack. At this time, Chapter 622. The Blizzard Beasts opened their mouths one after another and released magic. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. Countless rock thorns emerged from the ground, and the horses that could not dodge were directly pierced by the rock thorns. Even the knight was pierced by the rock thorns. There were also horses that directly hit the rock thorns. After falling down, a large number of horses stumbled, and screams came one after another. Just one encounter. The powerful world of Warcraft Blizzard Beasts gave the Roaring Orders of Chivalry a heavy blow, and the formation was completely disrupted. 2 rounds of rock thorns were released, and the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry behind them had already rushed over. List whistled and rode Dosen into the roaring river under the stone bridge, followed by the 8 small ones behind him. They quickly made way for the Orders of Chivalry to charge. In the blink of an eye, the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry had rushed into the chaotic Roaring Orders of Chivalry. Relying on the favorable environment created by the Blizzard Beast Squad, they madly slaughtered these elite Earth Knights. Countless chi collided and tore in the air. Fighting skills of various colors were displayed, and long spears and swords collided. Blood and flesh splashed, and the screams were drowned in the cries. Of course, the screams were mostly from the roaring orders of chivalry, while the cries were from the Coral Island orders of chivalry. The advantage created by the 9 intermediate world of Warcraft could not be erased in a short time. Watching his knight being slaughtered, Marquis Nuteo, who was following the charging team, finally couldn't stand it. He was riding a huge yellow tiger, which was larger than the blizzard beasts. If it were not for the dust covering it, it would be very conspicuous in the team. Suddenly, the tiger's body sank down. Marquis Nuteo got up and took off. Behind him, another 4 Sky Knights flew out with a whoosh. 5 Sky Knights soared in the sky. With such a powerful formation, once they attacked the orders of chivalry, it would definitely be a terrifying picture. Marquis Nuteo was completely angry. He was not ready to play the game of Earth against Earth and Sky against Sky. He wanted to directly defeat the Coral Island orders of chivalry and recapture Little River Heart Castle. At this moment, List had already returned to the front of Little River Heart Castle, and the 9 blizzard beasts also swam back one after another, lying on the ground to rest and restore the magic in their bodies. The Count glanced at the 5 Sky Knights in the sky, and then at List. List nodded with a smile that was full of fighting spirit. He said softly in a voice that only he could hear, "It's time for me, the Slayer List Tulip, to show up." He unsheathed the Sky Cutter greatsword and activated his dragon's Do Chi. Stomp! Stomp! 2 deep footprints were left on the turf. He soared into the air and directly went to meet the 5 Sky Knights. His eyes wandered around before finally locking onto the golden-armored Sky Knight with the densest chi within his body. Without a doubt, this knight who liked to wear golden armor like Deborah was Marquis Wildwave. When he was young, he was known as the Raging Wave Sword Saint, the Sky Knight with the perfect level of the water attribute, and the master of the river source Edi Maria Rainflower Stone. List saw him and he also saw List. Ignoring Llewellyn behind List, Di Maria rushed directly to List. His fighting spirit was high, but his expression was not the slightest bit careless. He had asked the fleeing knight of Little River Heart Castle and learned that on the battlefield the day before yesterday, List had defeated Yevich and Deborah with 1 sword strike each. Since Yevich and Deborah could guess that List belonged to the ancient warrior inheritance, he could naturally guess the same. There were strong and weak ancient warrior inheritances. The strong ones were the Marquis of Boulder, who wore bearskin, and were known as the strongest under the Dragon Knight. As for the weak ones, they were certainly the same as the knight training, with beginners and losers. In his heart, he had already seen List as a strong person like the Marquis of Boulder, so he paid 120% of his attention. In his hand was a long sword that was as translucent as a light blue crystal. One could vaguely see that it was originally a piece of bone that had been carefully carved based on the original shape of the bone. There were no gems embedded, but the hilt, crossguard, and blade all seemed to be plated with a faint silver luster. Surging water attribute fighting aura covered the long sword. The flying Marquis of Boulder saw that he was about to collide with List. He suddenly waved the long sword, throwing out a light blue light that instantly turned into a surging waterfall, shrouding List. His nephew, Deborah, was of the thunder attribute. He was of the water attribute. Boom! The waterfall formed from high-level water attribute fighting aura engulfed List in the blink of an eye, like a huge wave crashing into a surfer. But just as the waterfall engulfed List, it exploded in the next moment. Countless water vapors rose, spreading into a large cloud in the air. Then, within the water vapors, a smear of red blossomed, crashed straight into Di Maria's chest, but it was List, shrouded in flames. Dragon fighting defeating high-level fighting aura was nothing at all. Even if the opponent's high-level water attribute fighting aura was so thick that it was almost tangible, it still could not contend against dragon fighting aura. Ah! Di Maria screamed as he flew out. His golden armor was very strong, and the flame-covered sky-slicing sword did not split the armor. This kind of ability cannot test the depth of my ability at all. List took advantage of the momentum to fall in the direction of Di Maria's fall. But the tortoise shell is quite hard. It should be an armor forged from orichalcum. It has indestructible properties and has anti-magic properties. Even the dragon fighting energy is no exception. Just this set of armor was probably worth a fortune. List despised this very much. He hated rich people, but he did not have much time to think. Roaring orders of chivalry came with 5 Sky Knights. The Marquis of Wildwave was the first to scream and fall back, leaving 4 Sky Knights. One was being suppressed by Lee William, and the other 3 rushed towards List after the Marquis of Wildwave fell back, stopping List from continuing his pursuit. "Get out of my way!" List's dragon fighting aura surged, and he swung the sky-slicing sword in a circle. A charged move, burning red clouds, instantly blasted out. The flames were like burning clouds that filled the sky, engulfing the attacking Sky Knights from 3 directions. Lightning, wind, ice. 3 types of high-level fighting aura released powerful fighting techniques that collided with the burning clouds. In an instant, the sky changed color. Thunder roared and lightning flashed, and wild winds howled. Coupled with the scattering of hail, it was like the end of the world. The battles of the Sky Knights could already change the weather, causing local strong convective weather. However, this was only a matter of a moment. The next moment, the burning clouds swallowed all the changes in the weather, leaving only the flames burning in the sky. The lightning stopped, the wild winds stopped, and the hail melted into water vapor, evaporating and disappearing. The 3 Sky Knights were all hit hard. Although they were not sent flying by List's move, they were powerless to fly in the air, and could only fall to the ground at an accelerated speed. List took advantage of this impact, and his body once again soared into the air, looking for the direction of the Marquis of Wildwave. He was ready to strike while the iron was hot, but the magic eye that was constantly operating suddenly discovered that the roaring orders of chivalry below had undergone many changes. The originally colorful fighting aura mixed and tumbled along with the formation of the orders of chivalry. At this moment, it seemed to be guided by some kind of power, and the fighting aura quickly condensed and lifted up the figure of a person. It was the Marquis of Wildwave, Di Maria Yuashi. He held the sword in one hand and pointed it obliquely to the ground. His body did not leap, but stepped on the condensed orders of chivalry fighting aura, and slowly rose in midair. This huge orders of chivalry fighting aura and his own high-level water fighting aura attracted each other, merged, and quickly condensed into a colorful cloud. At this moment, a classic line inexplicably emerged in List's mind. Chapter 623. Bah! List threw away the lines that appeared in his mind in disgust, and even had a feeling of jealousy. He should have been the one to create this eye-catching scene of stepping on colorful auspicious clouds and wearing golden armor. But he was played by Marquis Nuteo, neither fish nor fowl, a monkey's crown. He frowned slightly, but his figure did not stop at all. No matter how eye-catching Di Maria Rainflowerstone's posture was, for List, it was just a matter of a sword slash. Blazing sun stab, covered in flames, he suddenly waved the sky-slashing sword and attacked fiercely with a charged move. Marquis Nuteo's eyelids twitched slightly, and a cold light bloomed in his eyes. He suddenly raised the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword in his hand and slashed down diagonally with both hands. In an instant, the orders of chivalry's fighting energy that had gathered around him seemed to have a vent, violently erupting like a rolling tide, and the world lost its color. Boom! This surging mixed fighting energy quickly collided with List's dragon fighting energy. The invincible dragon fighting energy could still easily collapse the mixed fighting energy, but the mixed fighting energy seemed to be endless. However, the mixed Do-Chi seemed to be endless. One batch of Do-Chi collapsed, and another batch surged forth, forcibly repelling the dragon Do-Chi. Then like a wave, it hit List, who could not stop his body. Clang! A very powerful attack. The mithril armor seemed to have been hit by countless big hands, and List's internal organs almost shifted. His body could no longer maintain the state of floating, and he fell from midair. Below was the roaring orders of chivalry. At this time, how could these Earth Knights let go of this heaven-sent opportunity? They all switched to bows and arrows, desperately shooting at the falling List. The arrows were like rain, quickly shrouding the area where List had fallen, densely packed with innumerable arrows. The sun was setting. List once again erupted his dragon's fighting aura, and with a powerful strike, he swept away the rain of arrows. He was not like those Sky Knights who were sent flying by him. Although Marquis Wildtail's powerful strike made him fall, his body was still under his control, and his dragon's fighting aura was still abundant. But just as he parried the rain of arrows, a whistling noise came from behind him. It was Marquis Wildtail controlling orders of chivalry to attack him again. His body was falling, and he couldn't even turn around to counterattack. He could only fill the air with dragon fighting energy to resist Marquis Newtao's second attack. Mixed fighting energy could still rely on quantity to make up for the difference and defeat the powerful dragon fighting energy. Show! He tried his best not to scream out loud. List, on the other hand, could no longer maintain his poise and crashed into the ground like a cannonball. The moment he landed, there was only one thought in his mind. What kind of attack is this? Why is it that even my dragon's Doqi is unable to resist it? Is it a secret skill of the Yuhua Shi family, or some special cultivation system? Subsequently, his body shook and his vision went black. He had already crashed into the ground, creating a shallow human-shaped pit on the ground and sending up a large cloud of smoke and dust. He felt a burning pain in his internal organs. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Ever since he transmigrated, he had experienced 3 wars and practiced in actual combat countless times. This was the first time he was beaten to the point of spitting blood. He was extremely shocked, although he had hoped that Marquis Wildtail was strong and could be his whetstone. But he never thought that Marquis Wildtail would be so strong. This kind of attack that controlled the entire orders of chivalry was really beyond his imagination. He had never seen or heard of it. Dong dong dong. The earth was shaking. This was the charge of the night. List didn't dare to lie on the ground and gasp for breath. Once the Sky Knight was trampled by the hooves of the orders of chivalry and destroyed by the fighting energy, it was very likely that he would be crushed to death. So even if he had the physique of a half-step dragon knight, he didn't dare to use his own flesh and blood to resist the terrifying situation of being trampled by countless horses. Dragon fighting energy gushed out, and his body bounced up from the ground like a spring. He didn't fly too high, but he narrowly avoided several elite Earth Knights who were charging nearby. Then he turned around and swung his sword. Full red sun. Flames bloomed from the Sky Slasher sword, sweeping away several knight who wanted to beat the drowning dog. Then he crazily spewed fighting energy and fled into the distance. Because Marquis Wildtail, who controlled the colorful orders of chivalry fighting energy, had already caught up. List, who had experienced the power of this move, didn't dare to face Marquis Wildtail head-on. He kept running around to avoid the fierce, majestic, and crazy mixed fighting energy attack. It had always been a smooth-sailing battle, and there had never been such a dangerous situation. He was very flustered. However, Marquis Wildtail was unforgiving. He didn't have any other thoughts. He controlled the orders of chivalry fighting energy and chased after List. Every time he swung the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, it would guide the mixed fighting energy and turn it into a tidal wave, crushing List, who was fleeing in all directions. Without a half-step dragon knight riding a dragon, List was in an awkward situation. On the other side, his son, who had pinned his hopes on his unknown power, Sea Wave Sword Saintly William, gradually realized that the situation had changed. He was originally chasing after a Sky Knight to kill him. However, as List was being chased by Marquis Wildtail, the 3 Sky Knights who were sent flying started to target him. This meant that he was facing 4 Sky Knights as a Sword Saint, and at least 2 of them were Sword Saints. How could this be? Lee William was no longer in high spirits. He wanted to turn around and escape, but he realized that he was surrounded by 4 Sky Knights and had nowhere to run. The situation in the sky continued to deteriorate. On the ground, the two orders of chivalry were constantly charging. The situation was gradually reversed. Originally, the Coral Island orders of chivalry were crazily killing the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. However, as more and more knights joined the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, the advantage created by the Blizzard Beast Squad was gradually wiped out. The Coral Island Orders of Chivalry were caught in a bitter struggle. Emily was holding the third knight's spear. Her mithril armor was already stained with blood from the second Earth Knight she stabbed to death. She raised her head and looked into the distance. Her loyal follower, Sir List, was being chased by Marquis Wildtow. On the other side, Sir List's father was being besieged by 4 Sky Knights in turn. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. As for the surrounding Coral Island Knights, the entangled chi was already in a state of fragmentation. Emily knew that the balance of this war was gradually tilting towards the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. The Orders of Chivalry under the Count against the Orders of Chivalry under the Marquis. It was extremely difficult to win, but she was not afraid at all, because this was a fight for Sir List. She was willing to fight to the last drop of blood. She clenched her fists. There was a sudden restless warmth in her body, and a new chi emerged. The appearance of this chi seemed to fill her body in an instant. Her heart moved. She understood that she had touched the bottleneck of the Earth Knight and became an elite Earth Knight. But there was no time for her to get excited. The Orders of Chivalry once again collided with the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. Many familiar and unfamiliar knights fell from their horses under the piercing of the knight's spear. There was even a Black Horse Island knight who taught her knight lessons. Suddenly, Chapter 624. Facing the knight's spear that almost killed her, Emily's gaze did not waver. Emily's eyes did not waver at all. She quickly raised her knight's lance, infused it with lightning combat chi, and thrust forward. In the blink of an eye, the two horses brushed past each other. Crack! The spear shaft broke. The spearhead pierced through the other party's chest. She had killed another Earth Knight. But it was to no avail. Coral Island's knight continued to lose members. There were originally more than 1,000 cavalrymen, but after a few charges, a third of them had already perished. Behind the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, new knights continued to emerge. These knights were not elites and were mostly miscellaneous troops. But for the battlefield, they were powerful reinforcements. In order to deal with the invaders, Marquis Wildtow dispatched almost all the Orders of Chivalry to attack the river source, the number of which might have exceeded 3,000. He wanted to completely destroy the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry here. Emily did not know what the final outcome would be, nor was she in the mood to think about it. Every time she killed an enemy knight, she felt her whole body heat up. Infinite power emerged from her limbs and bones, urging her to continue the charge. Charge! With a loud shout, she became the leading knight of a squad of knight. Holding the fourth knight's spear in her hand, she aimed at the Black Knight in front of her and suddenly launched a new charge. Thunder-attributed chi filled the air, unexpectedly condensing, entangling, and interweaving the chi in the surroundings that was about to fall apart. The knights behind him all felt as if their chi was resonating with something, and there was a huge increase in their strength. Following this feeling, the knights frantically shouted, "Charge! Charge! Charge! Flee! Flee again!" List found that he could not contend against Marquis Wildtow, who was controlling the Orders of Chivalry's chi. However, Marquis Wildtow's speed was not too fast and it was difficult for him to catch up. List understood this. His brain spun frantically. The restlessness and arrogance he had before the battle had been completely shattered. He began to carefully deal with every crisis. From the corner of his eyes, he noticed that even though William was in a precarious situation, he was, after all, a veteran sword saint. Not only that, but he was also a water element warrior who specialized in endurance and toughness. He would not be defeated so easily. Di Maria's move to control Orders of Chivalry is too strong. If I don't break this move, I will definitely lose this battle. The only thing we can do now is to first slaughter the orders of chivalry and cut off the Marquis of Furytao's orders of chivalry. Usually, to capture a thief, one must first capture the leader, but the leader was too strong, so they could only cut off the wings first. Circulating his dragon's battle chi, he barely managed to put some distance between them. List quickly switched to the swift shadow bow and coolly turned his head to look at the moon. 3 arrows flew in a triangular formation towards the position of roaring orders of chivalry, who was not protected by Marquis Nuteo. Boom! 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 Every arrow exploded, setting off a sea of flames that engulfed a few black armored knight riding on a black horse. Stop! Marquis Nuteo spoke for the first time, using some unknown method. His voice reverberated above the orders of chivalry like thunder. Hearing this, List's eyes grew brighter and brighter. The enemy's intimidation usually meant that he did the right thing. He once again fled into the distance, turned his head to look at the moon again, and killed a group of knight with 3 arrows. After going back and forth several times, apart from eating his dust, Marquis Nuteo had no other achievements. On the contrary, the more List shot, the happier he became. Moreover, he learned how to shoot and coordinated with the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry. He observed the momentum of the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry's charge and cleared out the Roaring Orders of Chivalry's resistance. With the power of the Dragon Knight, dealing with a group of Earth Knights was simply like using an anti-aircraft gun to hit a mosquito. Although it seemed like bullying the weak, the effect was remarkable. 1 person and 1 bow, coupled with a steady stream of arrows from the gem space, was simply like a rocket launcher with an infinite burst, shooting and exploding non-stop. Stop! List! You coward! Fight me if you have the guts! When Marquis Nuteo saw List frantically weakening the Roaring Knights elites, his heart bled and he roared again and again. However, he could not catch up with List. When he prepared to deal with the Coral Islands Orders of Chivalry in the same way, List would nimbly shoot in the direction of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, where he could rescue the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. It was a dilemma whether to kill a group of ordinary Earth Knights or protect his Roaring Orders of Chivalry elites, but Marquis Nuteo had no other choice. He did not dare to not rescue them, because the Roaring Orders of Chivalry was the source of his strength. Without the condensed chi provided by the Roaring Orders of Chivalry, he could not fight against List, who had the inheritance of an ancient warrior, head-on. The first time they met, he understood that the young and enviable knight in front of him was definitely a top expert of the inheritance of an ancient warrior. He had no choice but to use the true power of the perfection-level Sky Knight. The perfection-level Sky Knight was the pinnacle of the Dragon Knight, below the Knight. However, most perfection-level Sky Knights, without the inheritance of their families, found it difficult to display their true strength. They were usually just a bit stronger than sacred swordsmen. However, great aristocrats like the Yuhua stone family, which had hundreds of years of inheritance. Naturally, there was a battle method that was passed down from generation to generation, which truly belonged to the Sky Knights at the peak level combat aura domain. The perfection level Sky Knight who mastered the Chi domain had another name within the circle of greater aristocrats, Domain Knight. The Roaring Orders of Chivalry Knights Chi, under the influence of the Domain Knight's Chi, resonated and gave birth to a huge increase in Chi, condensing into a domain belonging to the Domain Knight. In the Domain Knight was almost invincible, and any enemy could not escape being crushed. This was also the reason why the Knight families other than the Dragon Knight could constantly nibble away the inheritance of ancient warriors and ancient wizards. Although the individual strength of the Sky Knight was not too strong, once they had the domain, they could display the strength of the top ancient warriors. Moreover, there was the charge of the Orders of Chivalry. In the competition between families, the final winner was always the Knight side. The Dragon Knight was just in high spirits for a while. The Domain Knight was the true cornerstone of the greater aristocrats. However, the unexpected happened. He did not know that List was not an ancient warrior, but a quasi-dragon knight who could not ride a dragon. Therefore, List was not crushed, and by relying on his powerful explosive archery, he constantly destroyed the foundation of the Marquis domain. Every time a knight died, the Chi domain weakened a bit. This made the Marquis feel angry and flustered at the same time. After going back and forth several times, the domain provided by the Roaring Orders of Chivalry had declined substantially, and the power provided by them had also seriously shrunk. The good situation that had just been reversed once again. The Coral Island Orders of Chivalry once again began to slaughter the Roaring Orders of Chivalry that Liszt had targeted. The miscellaneous Orders of Chivalry that came to support them collapsed one after another under Liszt's archery. The more Liszt shot, the more excited he became. He clearly felt that the power of the Marquis was declining. However, in order to not give the other party a chance to make a comeback, he continued to use kiting tactics, constantly weakening the Roaring Orders of Chivalry. At the same time, he could also find time to shoot the 4 Sky Knights, providing support for Lee William. Soaring into the air, arrows scattered. Chapter 6:25. 1/3 of the Roaring Orders of Chivalry had been killed by Liszt, and the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry, who were lying in ambush on the left and right, launched a sneak attack. Liszt's magic eyes clearly saw that the chi of the Orders of Chivalry condensed by Marquis Wildtao had become thin and loose, no longer as mighty as before. At this time, the furious Marquis Wildtao had nothing to say. Liszt clearly felt that he might have had the idea of escaping, but because the Roaring Orders of Chivalry was still charging, he was reluctant to abandon his Orders of Chivalry. However, when Liszt pulled the bowstring again, 3 arrows suddenly defeated a Sky Knight, giving Lee William a chance to catch his breath. Marquis Wildtao could no longer persist. He thoroughly understood that this furious attack was already a failure. Roaring Orders of Chivalry, listen to my command. Retreat. With a roar full of resentment, the Domain Knight, clad in golden armor, personally brought up the rear, trying to buy time for the Roaring Orders of Chivalry to retreat. Rumble. Following Marquis Wildtao's order, the Orders of Chivalry, who were already terrified by Liszt's arrows, turned around one after another, no longer daring to launch another charge, and instead frantically fled the way they came. The stalemate collapsed. The Roaring Orders of Chivalry fled in disorder, while the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry pursued. Unfortunately, the Coral Island Orders of Chivalry were already in the midst of a series of charges. Their numbers were sharply reduced, and they were unable to expand the results of the battle. They could only watch as the other knight fled into the distance. However, the Orders of Chivalry could escape, but Marquis Wildtao could not. After withdrawing the swift shadow bow and seeing the Roaring Orders of Chivalry begin to retreat, Liszt didn't say any nonsense. He swooped down towards Marquis Wildtao with the Skycutter sword in hand. High-level, fire-attributed dragon chi circled around his body. Bathed in flames, he activated the accumulated power move, Blazing Sun Scorching Stab. You want to escape? Have you asked for my permission? It was as if a comet was crashing into Earth. Marquis Wildwave didn't fall back. He was still controlling the thin Orders of Chivalry's combat chi. He swung his Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, creating a giant wave that clashed with the fireball that Liszt had turned into. Thump! The flames and the waves swallowed and splashed each other. Half of the sky was fire and the other half was rain. The flames were mixed with evaporated water vapor, and the rain was mixed with inextinguishable flames. Borrowing strength from each other, the two of them continued to swing their swords in the sky. At first, the impure water-attributed battle chi and the pure fire-attributed battle chi were evenly matched. However, as the flames continued to devour the waves, the Marquis soon felt that he was surrounded by flames. Roaring Orders of Chivalry had already retreated to the rear. Orders of Chivalry pulled his Do Chi away from him. His Do Chi domain was weakened once again. It was no longer able to resist the erosion of the Dragon Do Chi. From crushing Liszt, he was gradually being crushed by Liszt. After a few moments of carelessness, the sky-slicing greatsword, which was full of cracks, had already cut open his golden armor. If it wasn't for the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword being very hard and able to break off a little of the sky-slicing greatsword's blade, Liszt would have already slashed at him. No matter what move it was, as long as it could kill, it was an exquisite move. Clang! Another long sword collision. The Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword knocked off a piece of the sky-slicing greatsword's blade. Marquis Wildwave took advantage of the situation and shouted, "Sapphire's ancient warrior inheritor, List Tulip, the battle of orders of chivalry is over. I have to admit that you are very strong. There is no point in continuing to fight. Why don't we stop here and talk about Deborah's ransom?" List didn't answer. Now that he had the upper hand, he wouldn't let Marquis Wildwave off just because of some nonsense. Glancing at the sky-slicing greatsword that was already on the verge of being scrapped, he hardened his heart and suddenly roused the little remaining dragon's chi in his body, pouring it all into the sky-slicing greatsword. Concentrating all his strength, he brandished his hands and slashed down in a circle, looking like he was going to cut Marquis Wildwave into two. Seeing this, Marquis Wildwave's eyes were red. "What enmity do I have with you?" he cursed in his heart, but he had no choice but to raise the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword above his head in a panic to resist List's suicidal attack. However, he miscalculated once again. List's move was just a feint. His real target was the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword's hilt. Clang! The sky-slicing greatsword broke into two pieces on the spot and was completely destroyed. However, the surging dragon's chi exploded, successfully injuring the Marquis Wildwave's hand that was holding the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword. He dropped the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword on the spot. He seemed to understand that he had been tricked. Marquis Wildwave ignored the injury on his hand and pounced on the falling Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword. List was panting. That move just now had consumed too much dragon's chi. However, his plan was not complete yet. He gritted his teeth and took out the swift shadow bow again. He drew the bow and added an arrow to it. 3 arrows flew out. Then, another 3 arrows flew out. The ultimate meaning of multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows, was cast to attack the Marquis Wildwave's path. This archery technique was very exquisite. As long as it was successfully cast, it would almost never miss. It was the same this time. 6 arrows drew unpredictable trajectories and hit the Marquis Wildwave hard. The golden armor was indeed strong. The arrows could not completely penetrate it. However, the exploding dragon's chi directly blasted the Marquis Wildwave hundreds of meters away. In the next second, List fell rapidly and caught up with the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword that was falling freely. When he held the sword hilt, he suddenly felt a cold aura, causing the restless fire chi in his body to stagnate. Could the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword be made from the bones of an ice dragon? It doesn't seem to match my fire chi very well. However, the weight and size are not bad. Especially this asymmetrical design. It fits my taste very well. He held the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword as he landed. After a quick look, he liked the eye-catching design of the sword. It was crystal clear, radiated cold light, and had a strange design. It was very eye-catching. This kind of weapon that attracted people's attention clearly matched List's style of clothing. He tried to inject fire chi. He felt that this big elf soldier's fire chi bonus was very weak. However, whether it was the speed of infusion or the smoothness of the circulation, it was much better than the damaged Skycutter greatsword. Perhaps it was a little incompatible with fire chi, but it would have no problem filling the position of the Skycutter greatsword. The weapon itself did not have any attribute that could restrain it. It could only be said that the materials had restrictions on the circulation speed of different attributes of chi. Just like how different objects have different electrical resistance. As a big elf soldier made from dragon bones, the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword's electrical resistance was much lower than the Skycutter greatsword. Even its resistance to fire chi was lower than the Skycutter greatsword. Coupled with the sturdiness of the materials and the special attribute that the big elf blood gave, this sword quickly became the ideal sword in List's mind. He looked up and saw that Marquis Wildtao, who had been shot away, did not rush over to grab the Ice Soul Dragon's slaying sword. He just looked at List from afar, then took the 4 Sky Knights who had retreated and flew away. The remaining knight, escorting the roaring orders of chivalry, completely left the battlefield of Little River Heart Castle. He did not even seem to want to talk about the ransom of his nephew, Deborah. List stood where he was. He did not chase after Marquis Wildtao. He had not familiarized himself with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword, and his dragon chi was almost exhausted. Even if he caught up, it would be difficult to kill Marquis Wildtao. Moreover, if he really killed Marquis Wildtao, it would be a big sensation. Although there were many marquises in the Eagle Kingdom, as a great lord, the shock of his death or capture was likely to attract the attention of the Dragon Knight. Before the iron mine of Trap Dragon Mountain was snatched, it was not good to be high profile. Chapter 626. The surviving knights led the retainer knights and began to clean up the battlefield. They took in the captives who didn't escape in time, picked up the abandoned armors, swords, spears, and horses on the ground, and sorted the corpses of the dead. The enemy knight's body would be returned to Marquis Wildtao. The knight's body would be cremated on the spot, and the ashes would be brought back. However, most of the knight on the battlefield were injured. Knights with strong bodies did not die easily. Even if they were pierced by a knight's spear, many knights would survive. As long as it was not a crippling injury, they could recover after recuperation. These knights could also be exchanged for a large amount of ransom, or recruited as one's own knight. After the Sapphire Grand Duke released the knights' captives, as long as they won such a fierce battle, there would not be many losses. The prisoners and materials obtained were enough to make up for the losses. List returned to Little River Heart Castle with the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword. He intended to find Earl Lee William and talk about the powerful attack of Marquis Wildtao. But as soon as the Earl landed, he was surrounded by a group of knights and carried back. When List was being crushed by Marquis Wildtao, the Earl fought against 4 Sky Knights alone. If List had not adjusted his tactics at the critical moment and used his dragon fighting to control the archery, he would have gone to see List's mother, Melissa Longtaro, and complained that his son was deceiving him. The Earl needed to rest, so List did not disturb him. In fact, he had also suffered some internal injuries. It was caused by Marquis Wildtao smashing him from the air to the ground, which dislocated his internal organs. It was not a problem to use fighting energy to heal. Let the chef prepare the meal. He gave a simple order and went to the bathroom to take a bath and change clothes. He drank some Banpo milk and ate some Buthiel stork meat in the bedroom. He also took out a few magic potions to drink. He needed to replenish his dragon fighting energy first. Only with strength could he be confident and not be affected by unexpected events. Therefore, after taking a bath for half an hour, his body had almost recovered. His do-chi had also recovered by half, and he once again felt full of strength. In particular, his high-grade fire attribute dragon's do-chi seemed to have improved in this battle. The Sky Knight's advanced chi was divided into 2 stages, ordinary and perfect. Although List's advanced do-chi had already transformed into dragon do-chi, its essence was not yet complete. This was a brand new training experience. He was probably the only one who could train with a dragon before his combat aura was perfected. In the dining room, a table of delicacies had already been prepared. The chef was brought by List from the Flower Town. Although he was not as good as Mrs. Abby, but he was very knowledgeable in cooking and stir-frying. List had just sat down and put on his napkin. He already knew that List had snatched the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword from the hands of Marquis Wildtao. "My lord, I know why you're here." List tossed the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword to him. "Take a good look. Also, tell me about this great elf soldier's attributes." "Thank you, my lord." Arvin took the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword with trembling hands and gasped with excitement. "I thought that I would never see the family treasure again. With Marquis Wildtao's status and power, he would never return the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword. The Eagle Sword family has held this sword for hundreds of years." List listened to his explanation while eating. Although Arvin's aptitude was a bit wasted and the Eagle Sword family had long since declined, but the information about the Ice Soul Dragon slaying sword had been passed down from generation to generation. At the beginning of the Eagle Kingdom's founding, an ice dragon was slain. A piece of the dragon's forelimb bone was sealed by the royal family's wizards and later rewarded to my family. At that time, the family's Iron Knight ancestor, after several fumbles, forged a dragon bone weapon. Later, they obtained a great elf whose lifespan was about to end. They soaked it in the great elf's blood and recast it, completing the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword as a symbol of the family's inheritance. Its basic attribute is to amplify the ice attribute fighting energy, which can achieve a fourfold effect. The more powerful the knight, the more power it can display. At the same time, it can amplify the water, thunder, and wind attribute fighting energy by 2 to 3 times. Even the fire attribute fighting energy can achieve a one-fold amplification. At the same time, it can also increase the degree of solidification of fighting energy and slow down the speed at which fighting energy dissipates. But its real strength is the special ability given by the great elf's blood. This is a secret that even Marquis Wildtao doesn't know. I've always said to Deborah that I don't know, but in fact I do. The blood of the elves had a special bonus to weapons. List was very clear about this. As a small elf weapon, the Swift Shadow Bow special effect was to increase the speed of arrows. So he asked with shining eyes, "What is the special ability of the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword?" "Ice Sealing Domain." "Ice Sealing Domain. What does that mean?" Arvin replied, "My lord, I watched the whole battle between you and Marquis Wildtao from the castle. If my family's inheritance is not wrong, Marquis Wildtao is a powerful domain knight." "Domain knight? What does that mean? Ancient warrior inheritance?" On the contrary, the domain knight severed quite a lot of ancient warrior inheritance. "I'm just an elite earth knight and don't know much about the sky knight." In the knowledge passed down by my family, it is recorded that the perfect Sky Knight can resonate with the fighting energy of the Orders of Chivalry and form a powerful fighting energy domain. "Tell me in detail." "I heard my father mention it before. At that time, I just treated it as a story and listened to it casually. I'm not very clear. My father told me that the fighting energy domain of a domain knight is not indestructible. The Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword can freeze the resonance of the fighting energy domain and cut off the source of the domain knight's power. This was a new training system, or rather, it was a missing link between the Sky Knight and the Dragon Knight." List asked Arvin in detail, but Arvin knew only vaguely. He only knew that the perfect Sky Knight had a fighting energy domain. As for the cultivation method of the fighting energy domain, he knew nothing. Even the ability of the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword to freeze the fighting energy domain, Arvin did not know how to activate it. "My lord, you need to figure this out. All I can provide is that the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword seems to be able to transform the fighting energy of the user. I remember my father said that if he could use the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword, then he could make a fortune by selling ice. Unfortunately, to drive it, he needs high-level fighting energy." After that, Arvin handed the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword back to List with both hands and knelt on one knee to perform the knight's loyalty etiquette. "Thank you, my lord, for rescuing me from the cage and taking back the Ice Soul dragon-slaying sword that has been passed down for generations. Arvin Eagle Sword will follow you loyally and swear by the glory of the knight to charge for my lord." Chapter 6:27. Just as List finished his meal and took inventory of the spoils from the battlefield, preparing to explore the ice domain of the dragon-slaying sword in the afternoon, the blood servant that had been sent out for a few days had finally returned. "Sir, we have investigated the Coiling Dragon Mountain iron mine. There is indeed a huge iron mine there, and it is filled with mined iron ore. There are millions of tons of it. There are 2 sword saints and 800 elite knights guarding the trapped Dragon Mountain iron mine." Millions of tons of iron ore? List's eyes lit up. Back then, the Count had plundered 200,000 tons of iron ore, and thus accumulated his military merits. If he plundered another 1,000,000 tons of iron ore this time, wouldn't he be able to become a marquis in one go? After all, 1,000,000 tons of iron ore could probably guarantee Sapphire's use for the next decade or so. He quickly calculated in his mind, "With 1,000,000 tons of iron ore and my Ghost Blade legacy, I believe that as long as the Grand Duke isn't stupid, he will give the Tulip family a reasonable position. I can't guarantee that it will be as good as Marquis Bull, but it definitely won't be worse than the other 6 marquises. Following Iron Hoof Island's Marquis Bull Andy Sapphire's betrayal and capture, Sapphire was left with 6 marquises. 4 fiefdom marquises: Red Crab Island's Marquis Merlin Longtaro, Deep Throat Island's Marquis Wallace Pineapple, Golden Island's Marquis Roderick Golden Wheat, Leather Island's Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice. 2 Blue Blood Alliance's Marquis: Maple City's Marquis Glendonton Maple Leaf, Quicksand City's Marquis Nesta Great Flower Orchid. If they really plundered 1,000,000 tons of iron or from the Coiling Dragon Mountain iron mine, even half of the military merits would be given to Golden Wheat and the Taro family, who were in charge of the transportation. Lee Williams' military merits were still huge, and he would definitely seize one of the 3 marquises on Iron Hoof Island. If the Count becomes a marquis, the Tulip family will probably bring their followers to Iron Hoof Island to farm. As one of the Count's followers, I will have to migrate to Iron Hoof Island. Fortunately, there will be 3 to 5 years of preparation time before the migration. With this time, I will probably be able to ride a dragon successfully and have a showdown with the Grand Duke. These thoughts flashed through his mind. List didn't delve deeper. Instead, he continued to ask the vampires about the situation in Trap Dragon Mountain. The Coiling Dragon Mountain iron mine belonged to Dragon Lock City, and Dragon Lock City was Countess Lianshan's fief. In other words, the Coiling Dragon Mountain iron mine belonged to Countess Lianshan. Sir, you will never be able to guess who the owner of the title of Count Lianshan is. His other title is the Golden Age Marquis. Bloody Mary licked her lips, not knowing what to say. We, the Blood Servants, never thought that the Coiling Dragon Mountain iron mine was actually the private property of the Peak-era Marquis. Prime Marquis? List's eyes narrowed. Mary, I've told you before, don't keep me guessing. My apologies, my lord. Bloody Mary put away her expression. The true identity of the Marquis of Peak Prosperity and Countess Lianshan is the King's Dragon Knight, the master of the Black Knight family, Alonso Copernicus. In fact, we also discovered a pureblood vampire in the Trap Dragon Mountain iron mine. He raised his eyebrows. List felt that he and Alonso Copernicus were fated. The mastermind behind the betrayal of the Bull Marquis was most likely Alonso Copernicus. The financial backer behind the goat gathering was Alonso Copernicus, and the master of the Black Knight family was also Alonso Copernicus. Now, even the iron mine that he planned to rob still belonged to Alonso Copernicus. I haven't even succeeded in riding a dragon, and I already have to completely offend a powerful dragon knight. Or is it that when I announce my identity as a dragon knight, the person who will most likely initiate the dragon-slaying war will be this Eagle Kingdom Dragon Knight? This thought emerged in List's mind, and he could not help but ponder. Whether it was the few wars or the smoke missions, they all vaguely pointed the spearhead at Alonso Copernicus. Perhaps this person would really be his future opponent in the dragon-slaying war. Not every dragon knight would encounter the dragon-slaying war, but if a dragon knight wanted to build a country, divide his own power, and change the power structure of the world, it would definitely cause other dragon knight to take action. Either one or a few would come to test him. If Andrew Sapphire had not survived the dragon-slaying war more than 150 years ago, there probably would not have been the birth of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. This was a huge wake-up call for List. His gaze landed on the 5 blood servants. List was already immersed in his own thoughts. Alonso Copernicus is the biggest threat in the dragon-slaying war, and the missions I completed before were more or less related to him. Maybe this is a series of missions, in preparation for me to win the dragon-slaying war. He suddenly thought of something, and walked out of his thoughts, and asked aloud, Alonso Copernicus dragon? Is it a bronze dragon? Yes, my lord. List could not deny it, and fell into deep thought again. Alonso's dragon is a bronze dragon, and my dragon is a fire dragon. Production-type gemstone dragons and metal dragons are basically equivalent to militia, and elemental dragons are equivalent to regular soldiers. As long as I accumulate enough power, Alonso may not be my opponent. He had his own understanding of the accumulation of power. Weakening the opponent's resources was equivalent to increasing his own bargaining chips. For the sake of the future dragon-slaying war, it seems that I have to rob the iron mine in the Coiling Dragon Mountain. He was not an indecisive person, and with just a few thoughts, he had already made his decision. He then suppressed his thoughts and returned to the blood servant's report. Did you just say that the iron mine in the Coiling Dragon Mountain is guarded by vampires? Yes, my lord. The one guarding the iron mine in the Coiling Dragon Mountain is the pureblood Famil Black Knight. His power is similar to Tubert Black Knight, but he is a native pureblood. He also has 3 mixed bloods under his command: the Enchantress Phoebe, the black-robed Vansa, and the Fanged Seth. Only 3 mixed bloods, Bloody Mary replied. Usually, a pureblood will have 2 or 3 mixed bloods as his subordinates. Tubert only brought us 5 mixed bloods because he had a mission. Only Hamel and I are his true subordinates. List could not help but muse. Vampires are troublesome. At this time, Bloody Mary suddenly said, My lord, if you plan to attack the iron mine in the Coiling Dragon Mountain, perhaps we, the blood servants, can help you eliminate Famil and his 3 subordinates. List raised his eyelids and looked at Bloody Mary, his face expressionless. Only when Bloody Mary was nervous and at a loss did he speak lightly. As a servant, my first request is that you do not cross the line. Bloody Mary immediately knelt on one knee. I am sorry, my lord. Mary sincerely apologizes. I should not have acted on my own. Her expression did not seem to be pretending. Seeing this, List did not pursue the matter further. He only said calmly, Just this once, tell me your plan to help me eliminate these 4 vampires. We can pretend that Tubert invited Famil to leave the iron mine in the Coiling Dragon Mountain and head to the 3 Dragon City for a secret meeting. Along the way, my lord, you can directly kill him and find the 3 hearts he is carrying. The 3 vampires will naturally prostrate themselves at your feet. The plan was rather simple and crude, but List readily agreed after some thought. He had always liked this kind of simple and crude style. Overly elaborate conspiracies were not his forte. He always felt that the more elaborate the plan, the easier it was to make mistakes. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.